Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you can please take your seats, we're going to go ahead and get started. Providing opening remarks today is the investor advocate for the Securities and Exchange Commission, Christina Martin-Fervita.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you to all of you here this afternoon. We've had a wonderful morning already, and we've learned so much. We're looking forward to this afternoon's panels, where we will continue to hear from investors as well as entrepreneurs and members of the community from the University of North Georgia who have been such outstanding hosts. We've been delighted to spend time today with Dean Gowan and Provost Gilles. And it's really been an honor for us to co-host this on behalf of the Securities and Exchange Commission, along with NASA and, of course, the Georgia Secretary of State. So I do not want to stand between us and hearing from the students and the investors who will share with us their experiences this afternoon. For us, this is such an important opportunity to hear about what it is like in real life to engage with our capital markets, to try and build wealth for ourselves and for our families. It is really a privilege for us to be here in North Georgia and to be able to engage a community as vibrant as yours in these all-important matters. With that, I'm going to, I believe, introduce Claire McHenry, who is the president of NASA and a dear friend. We love partnering with state regulators. It is such an important opportunity also to have events like this for us to share information and just hear in real time what our own experiences as regulators are like. All right, so with that, Claire.
Thank you. As she said, my name is Claire McHenry. I'm the administrator for the state of Nebraska. And if any of you are wondering what on earth the space agency was doing here and why I misspelled it as well, just to let you know, it's actually the North American Securities Administrators Association. So as many of you know, are familiar with the Securities and Exchange Commission, each state also has its own state securities regulator, and they're housed in different areas. I'm with banking and finance in my state of Nebraska. NULA here in Georgia is housed with their Secretary of State, but we also have agencies across the United States that are housed with Attorney General's office or even a standalone agency. And some of them even have their own law enforcement authority, depending on what state you're in. But state securities regulators are often on the front lines of serving states, investors, and small businesses. Through our oversight of securities, the securities industry, and our securities offering, we offer resources to retail investors and small businesses. And we bring in investigations and enforcement actions to protect people and investors when there's been fraud or violations of the act. My colleagues and I regularly engage with investors and securities firms and small businesses in our communities. And through this engagement and through events like this, we're able to obtain important information about our communities and to help us do our jobs better. So I'd like to extend my appreciation to the University of North Georgia for hosting us today, the students and faculty who did amazing jobs presenting information to us, and the other panelists. Thank you to NULA and the Secretary of State here, and to the SEC's Office of the Investor Advocate for inviting me to participate. It's just another example of the collaboration that we get to do every day. So, but I also want to thank our retail investors and panelists coming and speaking to us about issues that are important to them. So just thank you and appreciate your sharing your experiences with us.
And now we welcome Nuala Zaharis, the Assistant Commissioner of Securities from the Georgia Secretary of State's office.
Good afternoon, everybody. So for those of you that may wonder, the Georgia Secretary of State, the securities team, we're responsible for licensing securities firms, the investment professionals that work for those firms, and the investment products that firms will offer to you. So our office and our role is very enthusiastic about facilitating economic development in Georgia, which includes personal wealth and small business growth. And like our federal partners, our mission is to encourage a robust capital market while ensuring investors are safe. But investor protection is a collaborative effort. Georgians, all of you here today from North Georgia and in the area, you want to invest your money and you should be able to do so with confidence. But as a part of our goal, our agency's goal of consumer protection, we partner with countless state and federal agencies and industry organizations. Some of the relationships that we are proudest of are here at this program today. And I do want to say a special thank you to the Securities Exchange Commission and Nika, for including us, for coming to Georgia, for coming to North Georgia to this phenomenal school. My son graduated from here, so I have a special love for North Georgia, and for including our team as part of this important outreach, and also for your continued support. So when I come into work every day, I mean, I know that I'm the queen bee in charge of our division right now, but the one thing I don't forget when I come into work is that I am a retail investor, and I, like many retail investors, face difficult, financial journeys. There are difficult competing things going on. Work, dealing with family, dealing with elderly, trying to manage a budget, or basically my spending habits. But all of that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. And thinking about what I'm going to invest in, is that a scam or not a scam? That gets lost in this shuffle. But one thing I've realized, that even though all of us in this room, our financial journeys may be different, we all have the same common goals. We want to be financially secure, we want to generate wealth, and we want to keep our money safe from the bad actors. And that is where investor education comes in. That building wealth begins with learning how savings and investing works, and also how to recognize what is a scam and what is legit. All the agencies that have come here today have outreach programs, including this one. And those programs that these agencies and organizations have are there to empower us, all of us, the retail investors, how to make sound financial decisions so that we all can achieve our financial goals. And by being here today, the students and the community, by being here at this program today, you are making that step towards controlling your financial future. And there's one thing you should never forget. It is your money. You are in charge of it. Guard it, protect it, and nurture it as if it were your own child. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuala. And now, Provost Gill, Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs here at the University of North Georgia.
Good afternoon. On behalf of President Mike Shannon and all of the faculty and staff at the University of North Georgia, I welcome you to today's event. It is our great pleasure to co-host this opportunity, this incredible opportunity for learning and engagement for our students and our community. I'd like to take a moment just to tell you a little bit about the University of North Georgia. We serve a little over 18,000 students across 5 campuses in a 30-county region here in Northeast Georgia. Our oldest campus here in Dahlonega dates back to 1873. We are one of 6 senior military colleges in the United States, and we are very proud of that long tradition of service to our nation and the number of second lieutenants that we graduate every year as part of that program. We offer broad access to education throughout this region, offering everything from associate level degrees to doctoral programs. We have strong programs in health, in business, in education, in cyber and security focused areas, and in the film industry as well. And so we are thrilled to have all of you here today, and I look forward to hearing more from our students and also investors from this region. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Provost Gill. Up next, we have remarks from the Honorable Gary Gensler, the Chair of the SEC. Chair Gensler, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody, and I'm pleased to join you at the roundtable and, to co-host this, with the North American Securities Administrator Association, the Georgia Secretary of State, and welcome to all the investors, students, community leaders, and other participants here today. There's so many people to thank. Of course, Christina Martin for Vivia. You heard from Nika, who runs our Atlanta office, Adam Anisek, and Carla from the SEC for putting it together. Also like to thank Claire McHenry, the NASA president, Georgia Secretary of State, Assistant Commissioner Nula. I was very moved by your remarks and think that the partnership that we, the SEC, have with the Commissioner of Securities in Georgia is really important partnerships, and with all of our state colleagues. Look, the SEC benefits from working closely with state-level securities regulators. You'll hear from my fellow Commissioner Ueda, who worked out in California. I worked a little bit in Maryland, not quite as Commissioner Ueda did, but these law enforcement partners and securities regulatory partners at the state level are critical, because as securities regulators, whether at the state level in Georgia, or California, Maryland, elsewhere, or at the national level, our mission, our charge is clear. For us at the SEC, we speak about a three-part mission focused ultimately on making sure that the markets, that's where the broker-dealers are, that's where the investment advisors are, the so-called intermediaries in the middle of the market, that they serve the investors like those listening to this forum today, and the issuers, people trying to raise money in the markets. And it shouldn't be the other way around. It's not that investors and issuers are working on behalf of the broker-dealers or working on behalf of the investment advisors. And the people listening here today and in the audience there, the investing public, you too are partners in this work. It's not just the state law enforcement and securities regulators and those of us at the federal level, but the public. And how so? Well, we benefit from hearing your voices and your stories in events like today, for sure, but beyond events like today. We benefit from you weighing in on what's called our regulatory agenda. From time to time, we seek to update rules of the road and we put it out to public comment. Hearing from you and your thoughts, the investing public, truly helps us. You better believe we're hearing from the large broker-dealers. We're hearing from the large trade associations. We're hearing from the large investment advisors. Well, it'd be great to hear even more from you as everyday investors. Further, you also help us on our enforcement work. You may be a victim of something yourself, or you might be alert to something. Please let us know about it. A tip, a complaint, or referral. And we get about 50,000 a year, and we need to pursue them. We need to follow up on them and follow the facts and the law where they take us, partnering again with the state securities regulators and law enforcement as well. But please don't hesitate to give us your feedback. You can also find it at www.sec.gov/TCR. That's for tips, complaints, and referrals. And while there may be many, many good actors in the world, it's just human nature that there are some bad actors in the markets trying to pry our hard-earned assets, our money, away from us. And what we want is a better future, as Nuala said earlier. If an investment opportunity, by the way, feels too good to be true, it might be that that's what it is. It's too good to be true. There might be something you want to research more. We have resources also you can turn to at the SEC. You can go to www.investor.gov at our website to help you do a little bit more investigation, research, what's called due diligence, and look at some common patterns of fraud. Once again, I want to thank everybody for raising your hand, raising your voices. Today, we'll hear about investor case studies about experiences confronting securities fraud, investor protection during periods of firm insolvency, barriers to capital formation, as well as the needs for retail investors, everyday investors regarding our rulemaking. And I just want to thank once again our colleagues, our law enforcement partners, our regulatory partners at the state level, securities regulators for all that you do. And I wish you a productive roundtable, but back to those of you in the room there.
Thank you very much, Chair Gensler. We appreciate you joining us today. Up next, we have the Honorable Mark Ueda, Commissioner here at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Commissioner Ueda, thanks for joining us today.
Well, good afternoon from a very wet and overcast Washington, D.C. So I hope you're having much better weather down there in Georgia. I'm very pleased to participate virtually alongside my colleagues from the North American Securities Administrators Association, the Georgia Secretary of State's Office, and the SEC. So thank you also to the participants in the roundtables and the interactive sessions set for today and tomorrow. This roundtable and similar events are a means to collect and share information among investors and regulators. In his most recent shareholder letter, Berkshire Hathaway Chairman Warren Buffett described his model of the ideal shareholder based on his sister Bertie. Like many investors, he described Bertie as smart, wise, and sensible, but she's not a CPA or an economics expert. Bertie is described as nobody's fool, but even investors like Bertie can be the victim of investment fraud committed by bad actors using increasingly sophisticated techniques. As a former California state securities regulator, I know that state regulators can be the first ones to see new investor frauds and to understand the harm these schemes can have on investors who may lose their entire life savings as a result. Therefore, open lines of communication among state regulators, law enforcement, and federal regulators are necessary if we are to move efficiently and expediently. In my view, the role of a regulator in protecting investors is to ferret out bad actors and foster the provision of information necessary to make informed investment decisions. Capital formation, a core SEC mission, and one that is vital to our economy, cannot flourish in an environment rife with fraud and deceit. At the same time, any investment involves risk, and we must avoid paternalistic regulation that presumes the government knows best. The discussion today will hopefully allow all of us to better support investor needs and to find ways to assist with challenges facing investors. At today's roundtable, you will hear from investors and experts, and will have the opportunity to attend a master class on financial and investment literacy. More information is available on our website at investor.gov. If you have the unfortunate experience of encountering a bad actor, please reach out to either the Commission or our state partners using the website that Chair Gensler just mentioned. So thank you, Christina, Claire, Nuala, and Dr. Gowan for organizing this retail investor and fraud prevention roundtable. I look forward to hearing the discussions as well as the stories of the investors. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ueda, and thank you, Chair Gensler. We appreciate you joining us today from Washington, D.C. Today, we are going to have a number of retail investors and other industry partners talk and share their stories. We're going to hear from 3 retail investors who I'd like to invite up to the stage now. I know that Rob Chapman is a retired federal employee. He's going to be joining us virtually. Mr. Stuart Swanson is on the University of North Georgia Foundation Board of Trustees and on the College of Science and Mathematics STEM Advisory Board. And finally, Dr. Ellen Best is an associate professor and the department head here at the University of North Georgia. So we're going to hear from them today. What we'd like to do is start with Mr. Rob Chapman. You'll have approximately 3 to 5 minutes to share your story, and then we encourage organic discussion to continue to discuss some of the issues and topics that you bring up. From there, we'll go to Mr. Stuart Swanson for the same general pattern, and then we'll go to Dr. Best to close out this portion of the roundtable. We'll have some casual discussion, and then we'll go into some prepared remarks from some of our partners. So, Mr. Chapman, welcome, and over to you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to present this morning. It's really an honor for me. My name is Rob Chapman. I'm one of several hundred federal retirees that were defrauded by a group of securities brokers about 10 years ago. The SEC brought legal action against these gentlemen. Some pled and were permanently barred as brokers, and some were tried and found guilty. I was asked to share my story, so here it is. I worked at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta for 22 years. I ended up as a division director. I retired in September of 2014. You federal employees know that the federal agencies have a retirement savings vehicle called the Thrift Savings Plan. It's a great opportunity for federal employees to build up a retirement fund. The government matches funds up to a certain percentage. I maxed out my contributions for the entire time I was working, and by the time I retired, I had a sizable little chunk of change. About 5 months before my retirement, I met with a specialist at the CDC HR department to discuss the transition to retirement, health benefits continuing, options for life insurance, and managing my TSP funds. About an hour after I got back to my desk, I received a call from someone with a group called the Federal Employees Benefit Counselors. Through that conversation, I came to believe that they were contractors retained by the government to assist retiring federal workers in planning their retirement. Because of the timing of this call, I was under the impression that the CDC Human Resources Department had forwarded them my information. Over several calls and even webinars over the course of several weeks, they answered all of my questions about all aspects of federal benefits, including health benefits, life insurance, spousal benefits, and options for reinvesting my thrift savings plan funds. The logo on their documents resembled a federal government logo with the eagle and the little circle. They informed me of several possible strategies for reinvesting my funds. One option that we discussed had clear and obvious advantages. It was portrayed as a great low-risk investment with guaranteed return, one that the government had vetted and recommended for retirees like me. They neglected to mention, however, that this investment was in fact a variable annuity, that there were recurring fees, that there were penalties for withdrawing in the first several years, that there were commissions, that they themselves were securities brokers working for a commercial firm, and that they were not, in fact, under contract by the federal government. I was used to the culture of the federal workplace, where many services are provided for one's benefit. Workers are sort of lulled into a state of complacency. For example, the TSP administrators, when the market changes, will send out a news flash offering advice on how one might want to adjust one's allocation of funds. I was what you would call a naive investor. It never occurred to me to question what I was being told. If I had known I was dealing with commercial investment brokers, I would have trod much more carefully. I was extremely busy with personal circumstances of my life at this time, getting ready to relocate and getting ready to retire. And I acknowledge my failure to apply due diligence. I'm just trying to explain what led to my failure to do so. So I was emailed a form for withdrawing most of my thrift savings plan funds and allocating them to this wonderful investment vehicle that had been described. They had pre-populated much of the form for me. They had obtained this standard government form from the web. To the TSP withdrawal form, they had appended 2 or 3 signature pages that were not part of the official form. I did not notice this. I didn't notice the difference in fonts or the page footers. These appended pages were signature pages for an application to open an account with their securities brokerage firm and to have them serve as my brokers. Unbeknownst to me, they had filled out the rest of this application from my information, and I became a client of their firm. Thus, I became the proud owner of a variable annuity. And about a month or so afterward, I received the prospectus for this annuity, which I attempted to read, although not very successfully. The monthly annuity statements began to arrive. I immediately noticed that there were fees and that the balance was in fact going down mysteriously. I talked to my wife's investment counselor, who looked at the prospectus for me and told me what I had gotten myself into. Later, on his advice, I liquidated the variable annuity, I ate the penalty, and got into more appropriate investments. About 6 months after all of this, I received a call from the SEC, who told me about a case that they were preparing against federal employees benefit counselors. I learned that I was not alone, that hundreds of federal employees on the cusp of retirement had had a similar experience. I still had all of my handwritten notes from the phone calls and copies of all the emails, so I was able to assist the SEC in their prosecution of several key players. The federal employees benefit counselors exploited the online availability of federal employees' names and phone numbers, forms used for transactions involving the federal savings plan, and they exploited the highly protected culture of the federal workplace. One thing that's occurred to me is that federal employees annually receive mandatory IT security training in such things as social engineering, which this whole scheme reminds me of. And it occurs to me that perhaps similar training, awareness training, and safeguarding their retirement savings would be in order. Perhaps this is something for the Federal Office of Personnel Management and maybe the corresponding departments in state and local government agencies could be more proactive in this area. Thank you for your time this morning, and I will welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. We appreciate you taking the time to share your story. One of the things that I think we're reflecting on a little bit is, can you share a little bit more about when you concretely knew something was wrong and some of the operational steps that you took for perhaps calling your broker, calling these folks? Like, how did those interactions and engagement go? Were they continuing to try and encourage you to stay with the variable annuity product? Or did you, were they sympathetic to your concerns? Like, oh, sorry, how did that go? Can you expand on that a little bit?
I had no contact with these securities brokers after the deed was done, after I was invested in the variable annuity. That was the last I heard from them. And as I said, I began to suspect something was not right when I began receiving monthly statements and noticed fees and charges that I had not anticipated and been informed about. And it was at that point I got in touch with my wife's investment counselor, who was very helpful.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing. Please stay on the line. We'll definitely welcome further remarks when we come back. Let's pivot now to Stuart Swanson. So, Stuart, the floor is yours. We'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts and reflections.
Great. Here we go. Luke Atwood, come up here and sit with me, buddy. I'm putting you on the spot. Come on. Those of you that were here in the morning session, Luke did a fantastic job. He's a junior, correct?
Yes,
here
sir.
at UNG, and I was blown away and impressed by his remarks. I also am an alumnus from UNG. I graduated here roughly 40 years ago. I was talking to Dean Gowan and reflecting on my experiences when I heard about the SEC event. I asked if I could speak and be on the panel. My experience and my reason for being here has nothing to do for me. I'm a baby boomer, just turned 62. I'm retiring. I've aged out. Luke is our future. And I'm serious about that. And I feel like all of us owe, to the extent we can, donating our time and our efforts to help these students. But my name is Stuart Swanson. I live on the north side of Atlanta, graduated here. You'll see some of the things I'm involved with. I'm on the board right now at UNG, also involved with the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics committee that is doing the advisory for those courses and facilities. So what I would like to do, first of all, is thank the SEC, and that is thank THANK. Thank you for what you've done. Could you have done better in a lot of cases? Yes, but I will not hold that against you. There are hundreds of trillions of dollars of securities that you manage, right? 20 to 30,000 broker dealers, advisors, whatever that you manage, right? 500 individual securities, and you're auditing and looking at those books every quarter, every year. That is a phenomenal thing to do. 24 exchanges. My gosh, how could I come and be critical? How could anybody pull that off? So I thank you for being here. I'll give you my remarks as observations, not as criticisms, not as, hey, you should be doing things this way or that way. I'm going to give you my observations. So with that, if you'll go to the first slide. Oh, there you go. Okay. So here's what I've got for you, ladies and gentlemen. 1985, right here where we sit, I started my career. I walked out of the gym across the street with a diploma in my hand, and I was off to my career. I had a computer science degree and went into software engineering at the time. But anyway, here we are now in 2024. This is what the S&P 500, if you will, but this is what the traditional equity securities did from the time I left college to the time I came back here today. Looks great, right? Looks wonderful. Wouldn't everybody love to go into a 40-year career and have your investments do this? It looks good. It tells a great story. It's inspirational. But I'm going to take you back behind the scenes a little bit here. So what I would also point out is that Luke next year will be at that starting point. Look what he knows already. He can speak to the SEC on very difficult discussions and points of view. He knows that right here. As you're about to find out, I knew nothing right here. So let's go to the next chart. So how do you talk about a 40-year period of time in 8 minutes? I don't know, but I'm going to try to figure it out. So first of all, my observations to the SEC and to NASA is that that line that went up and to the right and looked so great, it was nothing close to wonderful. It was quite painful. What I've learned about investing, it is a full contact sport, and you better be ready for it. So my quote in blue on the right, everyone has a good financial plan until they get punched in the face 4 times. Mike Tyson is right. So look what's on the bottom here. Everybody in the room knows this. The SEC knows it very well. NASA, my generation, 72 million people, including myself, 40-year careers, right in the middle of it, here comes the tech bubble. I had been 16 years into my career at that point. All of my savings were invested in it. 2 things happened. That bubble burst. What a lot of people don't realize is that we also had what they call the lost decade or the dead decade, where in late 2009, the market finally got back to where it was in 2000, right? Look at 2008, 2009, the financial and banking system collapse. Coming right on the foothills of that, we had to go through 10 years of 0% interest rates. My grandparents, my parents, they created wealth, if you will, through compounded interest. Well, if you're not making any interest, you're sure not going to compound it. And if you don't have compounded interest, you're not generating any wealth. That's a tough environment. And then COVID happens, 2020. Next slide. Oh, here we go. All right. So this is a wordy slide, but I want to go through it real quick with you. This was me 40 years ago, right here as I left this campus. I had a diploma. I had my first job. I had debt. I had 0 savings. And when I say 0, I don't know that I had $20 when I left here. But here's the problem. I left here with no investment knowledge, no behavioral science knowledge, which we all now know is what you need more than the investment side of it. No knowledge of financial markets, capital markets, global markets, real estate markets. Absolutely nothing on commodities, futures, thematic investing, sector investing, alternatives, derivatives, private equity, venture capital, everything you're hearing today. all these products the SEC has put together and is offering to the marketplace, I knew nothing about. I didn't even know about the SEC, the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, right? I was a computer science major. I knew how to write software. So that's how I got started. When you look at where I am right now, 40 years later, and this is a decent story. Slow start, strong finish. But guess what? Now I've got a diploma, I've got an MBA, I've got 40 years of work experience, global market experience. I worked for 3 of the biggest corporations in the world for market cap. 4 pre-IPO startups that had to generate funding, build a product, bring a solution to market, do an exit, and then move into the capital markets. I'm good. I'm just retired, no debt. I've got quite a bit of savings, fortunately. I would consider myself now where I had no knowledge 40 years ago. I would say I know as much as anybody right now on the investment side. And I understand behavior science, which is the root of whether you're going to make money or not. A financial mentor, I do real estate now. But look at these last 2. Here I am 40 years later, somewhat of an expert. I can't tell you, I'm not investing in crypto. I'm not investing in sports betting. I'm not a meme investor. I don't invest in cannabis. I don't invest in SPACs. And I know nothing about non-fungible tokens. So how do you get to this level? And there's still this big dark cloud of, I just don't know. I need the SEC. I need somebody to tell me what that really is and if I should be there. So what I would also tell you is that that was my persona. Keep in mind, again, Luke, this is you now, and all those no's that I have, you have a yes, which is, that tells me the SEC is doing their job. The University of North Georgia is doing their job. It's working. Oops, let me go back one. Okay, same slide, I just changed the labels. My persona when I started, my persona when I ended. This is important. First of all, I would change my persona when I started to a formula for financial failure. That's what it was. When I look at where I am now, 40 years later, retired, I would call this either financial stress or financial distress. Why am I retired? I've got a family. I've got things I could be doing. Why am I watching CNBC 2 or 3 hours a day? Why am I reading Barron's Magazine every Friday, IBD every Sunday, Wall Street Journal every day? Why? Why is because I got punched in the face 4 times during 40 years that pretty much wiped out most of the wealth that I had saved. Now I'm paranoid. I am paranoid. I think a lot of people in America right now are absolutely paranoid. We got to figure out, even with the education and now knowing all this stuff, how do you handle paranoia? How do you handle financial stress or distress? So I want to tell you a couple of stories. I worked for Northern Telecom, which became Nortel, which in the year 2000, prior to the bursting of the bubble, was the 7th most valued company in the world. We had a PE ratio of 99. Luke will tell you, get out. But anyway, the tech bubble in 2000 largely happened because people got out of their swim lanes. And the financial analysts started going to CEOs saying, I will put out a report on your company, buy this stock. It's going to go 20% higher. And I'll bring you a market of buyers for your stock. But you got to promise me you'll take that money and you'll go invest it and buy another company. And then when you add their revenue and their earnings, everything comes up, everything looks great. That worked until they went to saying you need to be buying 30 companies every year this way. The companies became more expensive. There was a lot of fraud in the books that some of those companies did because they weren't public yet. And the whole thing just exploded, right? And took out 10 years. But here's the biggest single investment mistake I made as a retail. I had 100% of my 401k on one stock, Northern Telecom. Why would you not? It was going up 20, 30% a year, stock splits, everything was rosy. We had, I would say roughly 80% at the end of this of my personal savings on one stock, Northern Telecom. 80% of that, and then don't ever do this, but an option is that you can withhold your salary and have your employee do what's called deferred compensation, where instead of you getting your weekly check, the company takes it, they buy Northern Telecom stock with it, and you'll get it at a deferred point in the future with a lot of gains, right? That's how it's supposed to work. We were all doing it. And of course, all of our stock options were on Northern Telecom. So when the bubble burst, NT took the hit, the SEC came rushing in. It took 9 years to sort this out, 9 years before it was totally sorted out. But the company went through bankruptcy, foreclosure, the assets were sold off. All of my wealth after 16 years of working went to zero, because of this one punch in the face. And the worst part of it, once the industry collapsed, the jobs were gone. So then we got a pink slip, and oh, by the way, you don't even have a weekly paycheck coming in anymore. And here's one thing that I do want everybody in this room to understand. I know the law enforcement, and the FBI and people know this. The real toll isn't monetary. It's not money. It's that lives get lost and families get disrupted. When this happened, I cannot tell you how many of the people that I knew got divorces. There were suicides. There were unbelievable heart attacks when people said we were sitting there talking about how are we going to get out of this? How do we sell our house? How do we get some money to keep going? That's why the SEC has to work. Failure is not an option for the SEC. This has to work because at the end of the day, we're talking about lives, livelihood, and families, and that's what we need to focus on. And of course, the worst thing about the bubble burst is it took 10 years to recover. So you're not going to believe this. Shortly after losing all my money in technology, I had the CEO of a bank, a community bank 40 miles from here, Community Bank and Trust, come to me and say, we would love to have you on our board. Number one, we got to bring youth in. We've got to start getting ready for the next generation. And you have the option to buy shares of the community bank as a private investor. Great, I'm in. This is diversification to me. Okay, now I don't have all my eggs in technology. Now I'm going to put some of my eggs in the financial market. This was 4 years before the biggest fiasco ever in the banking market. You know, you can't make this stuff up. So anyway, long story short, I would say my overall equity portfolio in 2008, 2009 dropped at least 20%. 100% of my ownership of the bank went to zero. Why? Because the FDIC came to Georgia and said, we're going to close 80 of your banks right here, right now. The bank I was with was one of them. When they did that, we lost 100% of our equity ownership. We had zero, goose egg, nothing. Worse than that, the way the FDIC did it, they took in our case, $1.3 billion of deposits, gave it at no charge to a bank in South Carolina, gave our ownership shares of the bank to the owners of the bank in South Carolina and said they can have it for free because they have better capitalization ratios on their books. It blows me away. But anyway, so back to back, a little over halfway through my career, I have lost everything in technology and then wham, lost everything in the financial crisis. These are absolutely punches in the face. These aren't slaps. These aren't cuts and bruises. This is a punch in the face. And the worst of all is that how was this solved? Okay, we're going to set interest rates at 0% for the next 7 to 10 years. Here we go. my third punch in the face. I have to go through 10 years making nothing on my cash. Really? Who gets nothing for taking risks? Right. But it is what it is. COVID, the only thing I would say is that we all learned from it and that equity growth was saved, but we know how it was saved. It was saved by putting $5 trillion of debts, not on me, but on my children and my children's children. That's how we got through it. I don't know if that was the right way to do it or not, but that's the way it was done. Point is, 4 major situations pretty much, wiped me out, made me restart. The reason why I'm here and talking to the SEC, I don't want that to happen to Luke. I don't want a single punch in the face over his 40-year career that's about to start. We've got to, when we say we're going to protect investors, we've got to protect investors. We've got to educate investors. We've got to make this system work. And the complexities now are so much greater than they've ever been. This isn't 60% stocks, 40% bonds anymore. The offerings that have been brought to the table by the SEC span every limit of our imagination now. And we've got to figure this out. I won't go through a lot of this because I'm going a little bit long, but my lessons learned are here for each of those 4 fiascos. Here's what I wished I would have done. Here's where I could have used some more assistance from the federal government and from the systems that are there to protect us. So what keeps me up at night right now? Obviously, we're still in a low interest rate environment. How do you go through your next 25 years of retirement with no income from a job, lots of bills, lots of inflation, and still relatively low returns on your safe money? The only way to do that is get into forced risk taking. I don't think that's what people would prefer us to be doing, but at that point, that's the only option the 72 million baby boomers are going to have to get through the next 20 to 25 years. I don't even know how to explain the national debt levels. It was $2 trillion when I walked out of here 40 years ago. When I came back here today, 40 years later, it is $32.5 trillion of debt. I don't get it. Digital assets, cybersecurity, oh my gosh, does this keep me up? If I was going to say there's going to be a 5th punch in the face that I'm going to take in the next 10 or 20 years, it's going to be, I'm going to go on Fidelity and I'm going to be looking at my balance and it's going to say 0. And I'm going to call Fidelity and say, what is this? Computer mistake? Oh no, Mr. Swanson, you transferred your money to a guy in India or wherever. Well, I don't think so. That keeps me up at night. That scenario can absolutely play out. I don't know how we manage that, but that is a scary dream. Deglobalization, a lot of people would probably agree to this. It is at least starting. Will it happen? I don't know. It's definitely going to change between a truly globalized, fairly mutually agreed upon set of rules to potentially chaos. But deglobalization, if it happens, how do we handle investments in all of these products that we have options to purchase? I'm here because of Luke. There's your younger generation. They got to be educated. They got to be equipped. I'm a little concerned more now about hoarding, where private equity or venture capital can target something, whether it's a material, a commodity, a particular stock, hoard those shares just to create an artificial increase in price of those shares, benefiting them, hurting everybody else. I'm getting more and more concerned about that. I don't like this concept of Americans turned into a nation of renters. People should be able to buy a house, make money off real estate like the last 2, 3, or 4 generations have done. We should not allow venture-backed or private equity to just go out and buy every home that comes on the market and then force people to rent it and not give them the option to buy and own that house themselves. And AI blows my mind. from an SEC perspective, you've got to be ahead of the bad guys. How you get there, I don't know. Luke talked this morning about the knowledge institutional investors have versus what I have and most of us have as a private investor. I struggle with this. If we don't have the most data and the smartest AI algorithm, we're not going to outperform the market no matter what anybody tells us. Somebody else says we're going to get the crumbs that are left. So these are things that keep me up at night. My encouragement, number one, I got at least 25 more years, I hope. Help me preserve and protect my financial assets and my investments during those next 25 years. Number two, it's all about Luke. Don't let any of this kind of stuff happen to his generation. Generations will come and generations will go, but we've got to protect them and do everything that we can. Don't put an IOU debt on my children's back just to prop up an equity market condition. Let the markets take care of themselves. People that buy securities are taking risks. If something happens, let it happen. Don't say, well, it happened and we can solve it by borrowing a ton of money that your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to have to pay off. Of course, we talked about the chances of cyber theft and the future of our assets. I would tell the SEC, stay diligent, learn to scream when you need it. I think the SEC is in a situation where they feel like if they scream, it'll spook the investors. Then the investors will make bad decisions. So I'm better off just not screaming. I don't know. I think the answer is somewhere in between the two. I think the SEC needs to be more vocal, a lot more stringent on the bad actors out there, and that will help mitigate some of this. Tell your clientele, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. I loved the morning session because there were a couple of comments along these lines. We all have to know at the end of the day, the person that's going to protect our investments is us. It will be great if the SEC can prevent it before it ever happens to us. But at the end of the day, we own the responsibility. We got to manage that responsibility, and then we got to hope for the best and that the SEC and other agencies can help mitigate some of this. I'm very aggressive, put the bad guys in jail, circumvent the bubbles, smooth out the market gyrations, level the playing field. You heard Luke say that earlier. You heard, I think, one or two other people say it. The playing field has to be level. And then on the technology side, AI, get ahead of the game. Watch out for asset hoarding. And, if capital growth is the result of the products that we're purchasing with the oversight of the SEC, let them do their jobs and let them return that equity. And, let's find a way to make this work. So I wanted to close with one thing on the university side. I am on the foundation board here at UNG. Publicly, this information is available, but we have about $108 million of investable assets, all of which are under the watchful eye of the SEC. The future of the University of North Georgia and almost every university and college in America is going to be determined on how well they can raise money, invest money, and get return on that money to put back into the university system. When we take this job, we're a fiduciary, we are a trustee. We look at this very, very seriously. And if we're going to invest $108 million, we're going to be conservative, right? We are not going to be risk takers. We're going to be smart, and we're going to try and diversify both through our holdings, but also by having multiple money managers. And we're doing all this, and we're doing it well. But the challenge is that the foundation board, including myself, we have to set the policy. We set the policy that then we give to some of the 29,000 agencies that the SEC oversees. And when we give that money to them, all we say is, here's our investment policy, stay in these guardrails and invest that money. But we're setting the policy. How do we, in 2024, with everything that all of us know about, how do we set policy with an understanding of where our risk tolerance level is in light of asset class bubbles that are happening once or twice a decade? Wild interest rate swings higher and faster at any rate than we've seen in this US market. Rapid inflation, potentially deflation in the future, wars, fluctuating trade partners, right? Global supply chain disruptions, this whole issue around 7 stocks delivering 40% of the entire earnings of the S&P 500. Crypto, I don't get it. Alternatives, I'm somewhat there. PE and VC, when it's done ethically and done in the right manner, is great. Impact of AI. But who are we as a board of a fantastic university that relies on this money to ensure its sanctity for the next 10, 20, 30 years? How do we look at all of that and say, okay, we're smart enough to write a policy, and if we give that policy to some of the 29,000 registered firms that the SEC has under their wings, that they can actually generate a return without taking a lot of risk. And absolutely, we can't afford to lose 30% of that, 50% of that, 60% of that. When I say failure is not an option at the very bottom here, failure is not an option. So these are the challenges. And as policymakers, enforcers, rule makers, this is what we're going through now every day. And like I said at the very beginning, first slide, everything looks wonderful. The charts all go up and to the right. There's nothing wonderful here. It is stressful. It is financial stress, lots of decisions, lots to do here. So I will conclude with that. The only thing I ask is that this generation be protected as much as they can be. We've learned our lessons. The baby boomers are aging out. It's all right here now. So my encouragement that that's what takes place. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Stuart. Now we'll welcome Dr. Ellen Best to the stage. Dr. Best, your remarks. Welcome.
Thank you. It's interesting. Did you plan this, that I would fall right between these two in age? Because I'm pretty sure you did. So interestingly, some of the stuff that that Stuart has brought up when he was going through the tech bubble and stuff like that, that's when I was in college. So I was in college when all the things were blowing up. And in fact, so my background, in case you wanted to know, I have a bachelor's in accounting, a master's of taxation, and then a PhD in accounting as well, too, because it wasn't enough pain to get the master's of tax. And when I started in college, the big firm to work for was Arthur Andersen. When I finished college, that firm did not exist. So that's what happened in the period of time that I got my undergrad degree. When I went out and was working first in public accounting, I was writing these things called Sarbanes-Oxley reports. When I asked, what is a Sarbanes-Oxley report? They said, we don't know, please write a paragraph about how we have good controls. So that was pretty much the period that I grew up in. So I didn't quite have the total punches in the face. I kind of got hit by the side a little bit on those, but not directly to the face. I didn't have the time at that point to lose anything because I was in college. So I had $0, sometimes $- in my bank account at that point in time. An interesting thing about being an academic is I get to kind of stay in that space. And so I've been in that space now for a very long time. I entered academia in 2007, really good timing. And so I was not actually in the period, I know it was really good. So I was not really worrying about what was happening in the markets at that point in time. I was instead worried about how to research academic accounting questions. Through that, though, I really focused a lot on education. Clearly, that's why I'm here today. I really enjoy education. I like what you said about educating the next generation. Have any of you recently actually picked up a 10K and read it all the way through? I know you did, Bill. Anybody else? Do you know how long an average 10K filing is? It's 55,000 words. Do you know what else is 55,000 words? The Catcher in the Rye. So if you would like to compare 2 or 3 companies in the sort of classical way, you need to go and read several Catchers in the Rye in order to understand and compare those companies from a level of truly doing your due diligence. So I don't know that we have anyone in this room, sorry, I'm calling all of you out, who are doing that level of due diligence. I know that I'm not. I'm calling myself out as well too. There's an article from Accounting Horizons in 2016 that says that the length of a 10K filing has more than doubled. I'd say it's probably more than that because that's 2016 in the past 2 decades. So the investment space that you found yourself in the 80s, that is not the investment space that we are in today. There is no way to really reasonably go through as an individual, as a retail investor, and read through a financial statement and truly understand it. I can pull pieces out. We teach our students how to pull pieces out of it. We teach them how to read the management's disclosure and stuff like that. Do you know the reason why these 10K filings are so complex? Just wondering, do you? Right? It's a lot of it is regulatory. So we live in an increasingly complex regulatory environment. Our businesses are getting more complex in their capital structures and things like that. But a lot of it is actually the management response to the disclosure, voluntary or non-voluntary disclosure that they're being asked to put out there. And so a question that I have for everybody, the AICPA, all of our GASB standards, the SEC, I don't know, whoever else with the letters that I need to talk to, why? What is the helpful nature of putting all of that regulation in place? I understand protecting people, and I think that we should be protecting people, particularly from bad actors and things like that. But when you get to this point of information overload, you can't even start to understand what protecting is. You don't know what the kind of decisions are that you are making. One of the things that I did in my doctoral program, because I'm a super big nerd, is that I did my research into sort of cognitive psychology and accounting. And I looked at how do you take basically a novice and turn them into an expert through how you actually work with their working memory and their long-term memory and things like that. I won't get too sciencey past that point. But you can do it. You can get someone to understand that level, but you have to basically introduce an entire system to them. And the 10K filings and things that we have now from the accounting perspective, that's a system that no one can really pull into one big piece in their mind. So as I go through and I see this younger generation coming through and investing, hopefully, y'all please don't do what I did. I took too long. I did. Our speaker we had earlier today who said, like, you know, you do this and you do that and you do that and you waste your time. Yeah, right here. That's what I did as well too, but I eventually caught back up. As they're going through, they have to then navigate, you know, the social media influencers. They have to navigate this incredibly complex environment that we did not have to navigate even, I don't know, 10 years ago, even it wasn't this bad, let alone 20 or 30 years ago. And they're having to do that in a more and more, frankly, insane environment, right? We don't know what's happening with cryptocurrency. There's plenty of people who say that they do, but it is incredibly volatile. My Mac students, shout out to y'all over there. We had a great conversation about this on Monday. They're having to go through this week and actually figure out, okay, what is a cryptocurrency? How would I create one of my own? They asked me, what does that mean? I said, I don't know. That's your job. Figure it out. That's your assignment. But because we have to exist in this kind of environment where no one has gone before. And we have to know, how do we ask the right questions? How does the SEC ask the right questions? The SEC puts out a lot of really great sort of investor education, but I want to reiterate what Mike Lavender said earlier, and I think it needs to speak more to the current generation. Like I said, if you ask me to sit down and diagram out The Catcher in the Rye, I might cry if I had to go through and do all that's a great book. But I'm not going to be able to do that in sort of a quick little 5-minute snip, right? I'm not going to be able to understand what that means in that period of time. And that's what today's students are looking for. They've grown up in an entirely different environment than we did. Attention span is different. The ability to hold attention is different as well too. The things that matter to them are different. Another interesting piece, I think, that goes along with the sort of the regulatory environment that we find ourselves in. You know, in order to be publicly traded, you have to meet all of these particular rules, requirements, and things like that. And a lot of today's today's young adults, I feel like, want to put their money into things that matter to them, both in terms of their job and in terms of their investments. Well, if you have this incredibly complex environment for a company to even become public, then who are you closing out of being able to be an investable company as well, too? What kind of companies are out there that I can't put my money into because they would never go public because the regulatory compliance load is so high for them? I don't know. But that's a big question that I would have there as well, too. So who are we shutting out? And then also from the me personal investor side, how am I getting shut out? Because I have a PhD in accounting and I don't want to go through and read all this kind of stuff. I know that I already have a leg up over most people in that area. And yet I use a financial planner because I don't have the time to sit there and read 100 novels. I'd love to have that kind of time, but Dean Gowan keeps me a little busier than that. So in conclusion, really what I wanted to just bring to the SEC today is how are we going to move forward in an era of information overload? I think that's the best way to describe it all. It is information overload, whether you're talking about your regulatory SEC environment, your tax environment. That's my other side, didn't even talk about that. There's a lot that's out there. How do we wade through all the misinformation that's out there as well, too? And then how do we bring that into a younger generation so that they are able to go through, possibly get punched in the face a few times, but then get back up again and be successful? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to our panelists. Very enlightening discussion, very lively discussion. We appreciate the courage to tell your personal stories, to tell critiques and criticisms of your viewpoints and other government agencies' actions, such as the SEC. And we just really value the opportunity to learn from you all. So thank you all again. Let's give them one more round of applause. And then up next, we have Camilla Elliott, who is the founder and the CEO of Collective Wealth Partners. She's also a certified financial planner, and she's going to take the stage and share some remarks with us here for a couple minutes. Camilla, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon. I'm saying good morning. Good afternoon. And thank you so much for being here. One thing I'll tell the students is you're way ahead of me. When I was in college, I didn't even know what mutual funds really were. And now I am an owner of a registered investment advisory firm here, well, outside of here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm very active in my profession, so I'm sorry I missed this morning. As a CFP professional and the former chair of the CFP board, thank you. We want everyone to be fiduciaries and act in the best interest of their clients. So today I'm going to talk about access. And it's something that's really important to me for our firm and why I'm in this profession. I was in the profession for about 20 years. No one in my family had a financial advisor. No one in my family was really actively managing or had a sizable investment portfolio. Being from Philly, we had a lot of government workers where they had pensions and things were done for them. So this wasn't talked about at our kitchen table when I was growing up. And that's why we started our firm. So our firm is a Black-owned, majority women-owned firm. And we're focused on underrepresented communities. So I think we all know that the wealth gap exists. But do know that the wealth gap was exacerbated after COVID-19. There were stats that you heard maybe 24 cents to a dollar, 17 cents to a dollar. But the Brookings Institute just announced their report that after COVID, it's 15 cents per $1 of white household wealth. And that's why we do what we do. And it's important to understand, how do you reach out to these underrepresented communities? You can't use the typical models or compensation models. Assets under management does not work for lower and middle income households. So one of the things I think it's important to talk about is how firms like ours, because we're not the only one doing this work, how we are reaching out to communities of color. One is we offer hourly financial planning fees. if you're making less than $100,000 a year, you probably don't have a whole lot of complexity, right? It doesn't take multiple hours to put together a plan for you. So oftentimes, perhaps just an hour or two, I feel bad that I think it's Mr. Chapman. If I was an advisor back then, I could have helped him, right? He's planning to retire. How much money can I spend in retirement? Am I in the right asset allocation? We can do that in 2 to 3 hours. We can sit with you. We can complete a budget. We can review your portfolio. That's what we do a lot for these underrepresented communities. For emerging, we had like a subscription service called like Wealth Builder, right? And it was individuals that needed an accountability partner. And I think that's what's lost a lot of what is the value in financial advice? It's an accountability partner. I always joke because like summer's almost here, right? And we all want to lose weight. Well, at least I do. And we know how to lose weight. Just eat less, work out more. Like it's so easy, right? But why do we have personal trainers? We have personal trainers because they're accountable. They're the ones that are waiting for us at the gym. They're the ones looking at our nutrition logs. Well, we as financial advisors, we're accountability partners, right? When you meet with me and I look at our financial planning software and I don't see an addition to your portfolio, I'm looking you side-eyed. What happened to your money? What did we do last month? What happened last quarter, right? I had a client yesterday tell me she likes me, but she dreaded meeting with me because she's been bad. And I'm happy that she said that because I want her to know that her actions and behaviors were not creating a positive wealth experience. So that's what we do. And then we also do fixed financial planning fees. So for some of our clients, we do have clients that have more complexity. We have a lot of Black tech employees who work at like Apple and Netflix and Amazon and Meta. We charge a flat annual financial planning fee for them because they do have complexity. They have tax issues. They have concentration risk. These are the individuals that we're helping with their first major purchases in their respective households. So I think it's important that when you examine how we can serve these communities, it isn't one size fits all in terms of a compensation model. You have to have different models to be able to reach these individuals. The second thing I want to talk about too is when we say financial advice, we always think it's investment management. But financial advice is way more than investment management. We do budgeting, we help our clients buy homes, student loan management. So last fall, we are all going on Save and Repay, and we know PSLF inside and out. We do credit review and support. We do behavioral finance. I'm happy you brought this up earlier, because one of the things that we talk about is why do people act in the way they act, and how do you learn about your clients to know what behaviors they're exhibiting that is supporting or detracting from their wealth. I can tell you what to do all day long, but if I don't know the why, I can't really help you. So what we do is we understand a little about your familiar background, like how did you grow up? One of the great questions we ask is, what does money mean to you? And what is your first money memory? Because people will talk and think back to childhood of, maybe their childhood, they didn't have a lot of money and they're spending money because now they're making money. And then, or certain individuals, you actually have the opposite problem, is they often times have something called a scarcity mindset, right? Where maybe when they grow up, they didn't have a lot of money. So now they're hoarding all the money and they're not spending it in a reasonable way to maintain their lifestyle. We also talk about risk management. We talk about, emergency savings. We talk about insurance. All of those things are really important. Estate planning. And of course, it is March 27th. We're talking about taxes. And we do taxes, tax planning, and support. So I wanted to help people re-envision of what does financial advice mean? And financial advice, yes, we do manage portfolios. We do assess individuals' risk tolerance. We do rebalance, all of those things. But really how we add so much value is all the other things and how we help them with those important investment decisions. And this is something new because I did hear the gentleman from UNG, I forget your name, Stewart. One of the things that I think it's important that I heard him, I guess thematically what I heard from him was, I worked really hard for my money. I was finding ways to make my money grow more quickly, and I was doing it on my own. And these are the ways that I, how can I say this? These are the ways that my growth was limited based upon my lack of knowledge of risk and my lack of knowledge of support. So one of the things we talk a lot of our clients about is that you do what you do to make money, and we do what we do to help you maintain, reduce your risk, and support your long-term growth. So this is the only profession I've been in. When I was 21 years old and I graduated from Penn State University, we're not in the Sweet 16 or any brackets at all. But my first job is I worked at Vanguard. So I understand I drank the Jack Bogle Kool-Aid, right? I understand the buy and hold philosophy. I understand, that from 1926 to 2023, if you invested in the S&P 500, there's a 99.7% chance that you had a strong level of a positive return in that period, right? I know that longevity and consistency and discipline is what helps people be able to retire and have positive performance. We're the ones that are the sounding boards. So before you invest in a community bank, or we're the ones that talk about concentration risk. It's really hard to tell that to someone who works for NVIDIA right now, but but we're the ones that tell you, you know what, it's important. Yes, we see your company stock is doing extremely well, but we're the ones that I remember Enron. Right. I'm really fun, like movie. I love The Big Short, and I watch all the time. But I'm the one that brings people back to, here's how this could go wrong. And here's how it may not be a fun conversation, but my role is not just to maximize your wealth, but it's to maximize your wealth in a risk mitigated way. So that's what we do as a firm. And then one of the last things I want to mention is when you work with underrepresented communities, there's a lot of distrust, right? I don't have to go into my whole soliloquy about, what's happened in the past in this country, but a lot of individuals don't trust financial providers. And so what we've learned is how to be able to gather these clients. A lot of it's through referrals, and it's through organizations that they trust. So a lot of my clients I get from sororities and fraternities. I get a lot of them from their friends at church. I get them a lot from community organizations that have seen me speak or had a friend see me speak. And that's the way that the traditional marketing platforms of, Facebook ads or whatever that may be may not work. But it's understanding, who do they trust, who do they look to, and how can you bring them in? I think all of us here understand the importance of investing, the importance of helping these communities grow, but it requires a lot of intention to help support them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Camilla. We know you have a hard stop at 2:30, so we appreciate you joining us today in your schedule. Up next, let's welcome Nicole Petro, the Chief Development Officer for Operation Hope, a financial literacy organization. Nicole, welcome.
I don't know why I'm bringing up these notes because I'm pretty much throwing them out of the water. This is the most humbling experience being in front of a group like this. First of all, I feel like the dumbest person in the room. I have to say, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to talk to people who maybe feel a little bit like me. Some of the words that are used, some of the vocabulary, it feels a little bit up here. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I came to work for Operation Hope, because it really is the reason why Operation hope exists. So about almost 4 years ago, I met John Hope Bryant. Put his name in your phone and Google him later because you'll learn a lot about our organization and why we started. When I met with John 4 years ago, and he was talking to me about coming to join the movement, I thought, I don't think I can leave where I'm at. I worked for Boys and Girls Clubs for 20 years. It's where my passion was. It was where, it's what drove me. Until I started to hear John speak. And I started to remember that moment when I was about 23 years old, and I had to call sick out of work because I couldn't pay my damn bills. Like I had a great job. I had my master's degree, but yet I could not make it till the end of the month. And I got that notice on my email that I was overdrawn again. Now, I grew up with a lot of advantage, but I still just came into the game behind. I came in with student debt. I didn't come in with any kind of, savings account. I was already in the hole before I even started. And so when I talked to John about joining Operation Hope, and he said, okay, well now, put yourself in a place where you're in a community that has no resources. You didn't even get the opportunity to finish school because you had to go to work. Like, layer on all the other challenges that happen and then try to make it work. And it made me realize that working for an organization that really, really gets to the crux of helping people navigate there, right where they're at, right on how do you manage the budget that you have? How do you build that spending plan? I love that somebody said that earlier, like that better than budget, because we all have to spend money, right? We all have to live. But that's what Operation Hope does. We do it at no charge. So I feel like it's that first step for a lot of people. So if you're in school right now and you're like, oh my God, I got a couple more days till I get a paycheck and I don't know how I'm going to make it work, you need to call Operation Hope, because we have financial coaches who are exactly like that that workout buddy, right? That are there with you. They're going to help you break it down. They're going to help you live on your budget that you've got right now. They're going to help you plan for the future. They're going to help you figure all of that out standing there right beside you. We do it virtually. We do it in person. We're all over the country. But that's really what it's about. So it's kind of that, to me, it's that foundation building that really the majority of our country needs. And then you can do all the other things. Then you can really start investing. Then you can get into a home, which we can help you with. Then you can build a business, which we can help you with. We've got a couple of our coaches, wave, that are here. That is really what Operation Hope is about. And I loved this conversation because Stuart, man, when you were talking, I was like, yes, I got punched in the face. I mean, punched a couple times in that 2008, 2009. I think I'm just finally out of the water on my house, right? And it's really hard and it makes you not trust. And so it's hard to find that trust, but that's what I think is so amazing about Operation Hope. And every single one of our coaches are amazing, and they help people right where they're at. So thank you for the opportunity to be in such a brilliant room. And man, Luke, you're making me feel really bad about myself. So if you're still in here, but it also makes me really encouraged to know that there are students like you guys that are here and you're already thinking about these things. And just the fact that you're here is amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Up next, we have our military investor perspectives. So I know we're running a little bit behind on time, but I'd like to welcome Jennifer Coleman, the Assistant Special Agent in charge for the Criminal Investigative Division of the Department of the Army. Jennifer, welcome to the panel.
Well, don't I feel bad? I was prepared to sit at the table and discuss a little bit here and there, and I didn't realize I'd be up here by myself. But anyway, I am a civilian agent with the Department of the Army's Criminal Investigation Division. I have been with the Army in total for about 31 years and CID for 23 years. The last 19 have been focused on fraud. All that to say that, we're here with the SEC and trying to give y'all little tips and tricks and None of which I can give you, unfortunately. I'm not smart enough. The junior, I guess his name has been called several times now, Luke. He has way more knowledge than I could ever think to have about diversifying your portfolio and everything else. But we do have issues, even being with the Army, as I see a couple of cadets in the room, we do have issues, and the biggest problem is getting people to come forward and talk to us. There for a long time, CID has been closed off and said, we're only going to work with you if it's if it's this type of crime or it affects direct military people. Well, now we're kind of expanding that, and we are working with people, if you're a dependent, if you're active, reserve, guard, whichever you need, just reach out to us. I mean, we may not be the subject matter experts, but we know where to go. We know who to talk to. And if it's another soldier, whether they be enlisted, officer, or a civilian that is committing these crimes or doing this, just come talk to us, because we have, besides our investigative ability, our job is to prevent and educate, and we have other means to kind of help with the process. So whether it is to suspend or debar someone to get them off the installation to make sure that they can't have that access or that knowledge of just in general, that knowledge of all the PII or whatever it is that they may need, or that just because someone wears the suit, to make sure you don't know that means that they're automatically the best person to go to. It doesn't. Like it's been said previously, and a lot of times, do your research, verify who you're going to put your money with. Just make sure the research is the key. There's just no, I can't think of the words right now, but there's just no better way to do it than to sit there, Google someone, get multiple sources. And I know college, you're used to doing the multiple sources and make sure it's not Wikipedia. So other than that, we have a few cases, like I said, but we're really just now starting to get into those types of cases. So if you ever need to reach out, we are at Fort Gillem, and we cover quite a few states. But right now, if Northern District, Middle District, and even if it's elsewhere, just feel free to contact us, because we can get you wherever you need to go. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. We very much value the relationship and partnership with the Department of the Army, and can't thank you enough for everything that you do. So thank you for being here today. Up next, we have a very exciting academic presentation from the students and faculty of the University of North Georgia. So leading this panel is Kurt Schultzke. He is an attorney, he's a CPA, he's a certified fraud examiner, and he's also a professor of accounting here at University of North Georgia. Joining him are Abby Keener, a Master's of Accountancy student, Troy Harris, also Master's of Accountancy student, and Dustin Ward, who's a senior and an accounting major. So Kurt, welcome. Thank you for taking the time, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give an introduction of our team just like you talked about, and then we'll hop right into our presentation. My name is Dustin Ward, I'm an accounting senior here at the University of North Georgia, and I'm an incoming intern at KPMG and Deloitte. Next, we have Abby Keener. Abby Keener, she's a private Master of Accountancy program, and she is a tax associate at Rushton & Company. Next, we have Troy Harris. Like Abby, is a part of our Master of Accountancy program here at UNG, and he is an incoming audit staff at Clifton Larson Allen. And next, we have Professor Kurt Schultzke, who teaches auditing, data analytics, AIS, and risk management here at UNG. And today, we're going to be describing what a reasonable investor is. So at the heart of our conversation lies four main pillars about what a retail investor needs. But before we even get into that, I want to describe to you what a retail investor is. So like Luke said earlier, a retail investor is an average person that invests. That's not a professional. So as a retail investor, you need to know what public companies to invest in. You also need to know the freedom and the consequences of when you invest. So let's say you invest $1,000 in a stock. You as a retail investor need to understand that the stock can go up or the stock can go down, and you can have a gain or a loss. You also need to understand the information that is there and available for you. All this information needs to be clear for retail investors so they can be able to invest correctly, as well as the regulatory issues. All regulations need to be clear for retail investors to invest. So speaking of uncertainty, uncertainty can happen through multiple avenues. Okay. Okay.
So sometimes it's through a clicker.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that, guys. So speaking of uncertainty, uncertainty can happen through multiple avenues, such as economic changes, company changes, or regulatory changes. So I, as a retail investor, have invested in Porsche. Porsche was founded in 1931, a German car company. They recently went public as of September 2022. And some of the issues that they had were supply chain. Obviously, during 2022, they weren't able to get the supplies they need to build the automobile, so they were able to sell less. Competition. A main hot thing on the market right now are EV vehicles, such as Tesla and Rivian. One of the main competitors of Porsche is Rivian. Why? Because the former CEO of Porsche is now the COO at Rivian. And so when Porsche went public, it was the largest IPO in their market at 78 billion euros or 82 billion USD. And so by them going public offers them a good growth, or it can expose them negatively in the market. So I, as a retail investor, want to know, why did they go public? Is there something they're not telling us, or do they just want more investors in the company? Material info is essential and needed to have successful retail investing. Materiality revolves around a reasonable investor. Who is a reasonable investor? What is a reasonable investor? The PCAOB does not define what a reasonable investor is. The SEC, plaintiffs, most people all butcher the word retail investing. And so now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Troy, so he can describe retail investing in the courts of the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Dustin. So now that we've discussed materiality, let's define it. The SEC adopts the Supreme Court definition of materiality, which is a fact is material when there is a substantial likelihood that a reasonable investor would view the fact as significantly altering the total mix of information about that company. We pull that definition from the Supreme Court case TSC Indus versus Northweb. And one other major takeaway from this court case in terms of materiality is the fact that in order to determine materiality, a delicate assessment of possible inferences made by a reasonable investor must be made. Does an investor actually care about this? Does this really affect their decision-making process when they decide to invest in a company? Another court case that helps define the term materiality is Basic Inc. versus Levinson. In this court case, there are two main takeaways. First, that no single fact always determines materiality. There's not a bright line rule that says, oh, this is always material, this is always not. It's a total mix of information that matters when talking about materiality. Second, investors are not childlike. They understand the risks that they take when they choose to invest in a company, and they also understand that financial statements are audited under materiality. So now we'll discuss two cases that we believe illustrate very well the difficulties there are when it comes to defining a reasonable investor. And this first course case is Matrix Initiatives versus Siracusano. I like to think of this case as the spray your smell away case. In this case, Matrix was accused of omitting 23 medical reports in that they failed to disclose that their spray led to a loss of sense of smell. Matrix's defense was that there was a lack of significant statistical data that backed up this claim that their nasal spray led to a loss of sense of smell, and that a reasonable investor would not be deterred by this fact. And the district court actually agreed with them. They said that this data was not material to the overall total mix of information about this company. But eventually the case went to the appeals and eventually made it to Supreme Court, where they actually decided to reverse the decision, saying that a reasonable investor does not need statistical evidence in order to infer causation. So what does this mean? If two different courts in the same case can't agree on what a reasonable investor means, that just shows the difficulty there is in actually defining the term reasonable investor. The next case that we believe illustrates this point is SEC versus Bonan Huang. In this case, a Capital One fraud analyst, Bonan Huang, used non-public Capital One credit card data in order to accumulate a certain percentage of revenue for publicly traded companies, which he was trading. He was able to, using this data, he was able to accumulate 0 to 4% of any given company's revenue during a certain period before they released the financial statements. Now, what did he argue? He argued that his percentage of revenue that he had access to was so small that it was actually immaterial to the total mix of information available about this company. He argued that his tiny slice actually did not matter to the overall big picture of the company. Now, what ended up happening was Wong ended up admitting to experiencing over 13,000% growth during his 3-year period that he was using this data. And the court eventually decided that although he only had access to 0 to 4% of the revenue, it significantly altered the total mix of information available, and that any reasonable investor would find it important when deciding to make their decision on whether they'd invest or not. And the way that we wanted to illustrate this point is by having AI generate a picture of a mouse chasing an elephant, signifying that his small percent of revenue was extremely important for the total mix of information. But every time we tried to do so, it gave us this picture of the elephant chasing the mouse. And it also gave us this message saying the system detected potentially unsafe content. So it's safe to say we believe this AI program is too heavily regulated. So how did the SEC contradict the Supreme Court's definition of materiality? The first can be seen in the jury instruction given in the case, to where the SEC told the jury material information is that which a reasonable investor would have considered significant in making an investment decision. This directly contradicts the definition given by the Supreme Court, which states that for something to be material, there has to be a substantial likelihood that a reasonable investor would find it important in their decision to invest, and that alters the total mix of information available about this company. The second contradiction can be found in the SEC's argument, where they argued during the court case that non-public information about a company's revenue is material. And this contradicts what the Supreme Court said, where they said materiality is a total mix of information. There is no bright line rule that says whether something is or is not material. Now, to talk more about the current standards and how they can be paired with AI technology in order to further clarify what a reasonable investor looks like, I will pass it to Professor Kurt Schultzke.
Thank you. So it's a real honor to participate in today's roundtable. I appreciate the opportunity to share some ideas on improving the retail investing experience. And I want to especially thank my student team for doing such a great job of preparing for this event. Dustin touched on some of his experience with Porsche, while Troy pointed to the courtroom chaos arising from the judicial definition of materiality. I'll briefly explore how the SEC might help retail investors by calming the chaos. The bear doesn't have to fight against itself. Let's start with a question posed by one Supreme Court justice during the oral argument of Matrix v. Syracusano, which is a threat by a group of investors to sell their shares over rumors that the company is linked to Satan material information. So I'll let that percolate for a few minutes. With respect to the definition of reasonable investor, U.S. retail investors are at a competitive disadvantage to their European and U.S. private equity counterparts. How is this the case? Well, it turns out that the AICPA, there we go, the AICPA and IAASB, which is the international equivalent of the AICPA, have clearly defined reasonable investor, while the SEC and the PCAOB have not. It's that simple. In public EU and private US markets, reasonable investors must have knowledge of business, economy, and accounting. They must be willing to diligently study financial statements, recognize the impact of uncertainty and subjective judgment in estimates and projections, and make reasonable judgments. The definition of reasonable investor affects everything in securities regulation, from disclosure rules to enforcement. With no definition, anything goes. How should we define reasonable investor? We can solicit informal input, as the SEC does, through the notice and comment rulemaking process. But technology can also help. Come on, technology. There we go. So could we treat the entire contents of the internet as a proxy for the community's thinking about reasonable investor? Using large language models, or LLMs, we can do just that. So we hooked up OpenAI's ChatGPT to Bayesian Labs' Helixia to model the reasonable investor. Our prompts included these keywords. Come on. All right, there we go. So risks, skills, goals, values, traits, biases, and characteristics. Plus, we threw in a summary of Warren Buffett, Commissioner Ueda, great minds, right? Warren Buffett's value investing method and the AICPA's reasonable investor definition. We told Helixia and ChatGPT to find related dimensions or variables together with their numeric embeddings. Let's see, we'll stay here on this one. So running Bayesian Labs' augmented naive Bayesian algorithm on this data stew, we produced this colorful network that you see on the screen now of nodes and the arcs or the lines connecting them. This is a Bayesian network model of a reasonable investor through the eyes of the entire internet. Yes, this is only one very early model. No, it isn't peer-reviewed, but neither was Darwin's Origin of the Species or Crick and Watson's double helix, or for that matter, the Fifth Amendment of to the US Constitution. No, I'm not equating myself to Crick, Watson, or John Adams. Which risks appear in the network and which do not? What does their presence or absence say about their importance to retail investors? Could such a model help the SEC define retail investor? Should we amend the Administrative Procedure Act to require agencies to get input from Helixia when they're drafting rules? That's just a joke. We can extract more value from this network through, come on, baby. Whoops, I may have done it twice. Right there. So we can extract more value through node force analysis. So as you see on the screen, node force is the sum of incoming and outgoing KL divergence. No, I don't expect 99% of you to even understand what I just said, but that's okay. This is what it is, an information entropy metric. And it's something that information theory people and computer scientists would resonate to. For the rest of us, the bigger the bubble, the greater the relative importance to the reasonable investor. And the thicker the arc or line, the stronger the connection between the nodes. Market risk, financial knowledge, and overconfidence bias loom the largest, as you can see. Strongest connections appear between market risk and liquidity risk, and reasonable investor and makes reasonable judgments. What does this model say about disclosure rules? What investor traits and behaviors should the rules foster? Which risks call for disclosure emphasis? What happens to retail investors if disclosure rules are misaligned with market risks and, yes, rewards? A few more questions come to mind. Whoops. Yeah, Chairman Gensler will get involved pretty soon here. So here's some questions, and some of them are written up here on the screen, and some of them I'm just going to articulate. So how can the SEC protect a retail investor population that it has not defined and therefore cannot fully understand? The definition of reasonable investor affects everything about retail investing, from the stocks available to buy and the information available about them to enforcement priorities. With no definition, anything goes. Does the system throw off too many unsafe content warnings? What about those rumored links to Satan? Should a reasonable investor sue over their omission from an MD&A? As Yogi Berra famously said, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. The market hates uncertainty. How can we define reasonable investor to help retail investors make better predictions about the future? The broader the definition, the higher the uncertainty. So Abby will close now by applying some of this thinking to the SEC's controversial new climate disclosure rules, which are now predictably mired in courtroom chaos. If only they had first consulted Helixia. Abby, take it away.
Thank you. So on,
You're way back.
oh, how do I go?
Here, let's see if we can work this out. So this is backwards, right? So, there.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to push it backward from what you'd normally be if you're facing the screen.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Want me to do it?
Yeah, you can do it.
All right.
Okay. So on March 6th, the SEC voted to adopt a rule requiring companies to disclose their climate-related risks. Most of you probably know. And the initiative behind this disclosure, as stated by Chairman Gensler, is to give investors full, fair, and truthful information as to these climate-related risks that are material or likely to be material in impacting a company's financial statements, business operations, or value chain.
Oops. Oh, I did twice. There's some latency in this system. Hello. Apparently doesn't like the back button very much either. There we go.
So this rule, among other things, requires companies to identify these risks and their impacts, management, board oversight, their risk assessment procedures and strategies, their scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions for non-exempt companies. And while it was heavily adapted since its original proposal in March of 22, it does still have pretty steep requirements for registrants. And
Try it.
okay.
Hello.
I can just keep going.
Go ahead.
It still has pretty steep requirements for registrants, and in the final rule that was published on March 6th, they do refer to the SEC does refer to the SCOTUS's definition of materiality and the reasonable investor, which we've discussed earlier. So we're going to be talking about how this reasonable investor being defined might help non-public and public companies. So not just with this climate-related risk disclosures, but with other disclosures as well. We feel like there are some ways that non-public companies may be deterred from going public, and even current public companies might be discouraged while they are public. Some of these ways are through compliance costs, litigation, and investor confidence, and I'm going to touch on those briefly. But with compliance costs, we feel that, kind of as Dr. Bess was mentioning earlier, that some of these companies might feel like the costs just outweigh the benefits after a while, that it can be so expensive and so troublesome to meet all of the disclosures in that very long 10K that they may just say, you know what, we don't need the capital that bad, we're just not going to go public, which is not great for retail investors. And then litigation, we feel that some non-public companies might feel like, well, these disclosures are so hard to implement that we're just opening ourselves up to so much scrutiny that we're just being, someone's waiting for us to trip up. And so that's also not good for retail investors, right? Because we don't want companies to feel like they can't go public. We need companies to invest in. And while this climate-related risk disclosure does have a safe harbor clause, not all disclosures do, right? So we want to do everything we can to help non-public companies become public and encourage that. And last, investor confidence. I feel personally like non-public companies might feel like maybe they don't have the aptitude or they just don't have the confidence in implementing these disclosures. Like maybe they're so complex that they're like, we don't know how to even begin to implement that, right? So they might get discouraged and not have confidence, but then also the investor saying, well, if I can't even define myself as a reasonable investor, how am I supposed to know what I'm looking at as material? So that's kind of the three pillars of maybe things that could discourage current public companies or non-public companies. And we feel that if the SEC were to elaborate on this definition of materiality in the reasonable investor, it might help retail investors. Just in summary, we feel like the points listed on the screen here, these are all things that retail investors need, and regulatory clarity listed at the bottom is only going to help retail investors. They need more public companies to invest in. They need to be able to take that risk. And so if we could get clarity on the reasonable investor, that would accomplish that. And then, yeah, in summary, we feel that Commissioner Peirce's statement that she made last year on cryptocurrency summarizes the way we feel on the reasonable investor really well, that if everything is so ambiguous, then we just don't know how we don't know how to move forward, and retail investors feel that. So with that, we want to say thank you for letting us present, and we hope that we'll see some of our suggestions implemented. So thank you.
Thank you so much to Professor Schultzke, Abby, Troy, and Dustin. Now we will have closing remarks from our investor advocate, Christina Martin-Fervita from the SEC.
Well, thank you to the terrific panels this afternoon, as well as this morning. I think there are a number of themes that we've heard throughout the day today, in a sense, really not summarized, but there was a specific focus to this last panel that made me really think about what these different themes were. We've heard a lot today about information overload and how difficult it is to do the due diligence that we have also heard all day is very important for all investors, but retail investors to undertake. And we have heard, I think, about the tension that emerges from those two strands. I think we've also heard throughout the day today about the importance of being prepared, having a financial plan, and having financial literacy education. But again, the tension that contains when we are in an environment where, another word we heard a lot about today, trust, there is a lack of trust regarding the sources of information you have available to you, so many sources of information. And then with this panel, which I enjoyed as a lawyer or a recovering lawyer, I'm not a securities lawyer, which is very important for everyone in this room to understand. But there are many securities lawyers in this room right now, so please speak to them about your questions. I enjoyed this panel because this issue of what is it reasonable for all regulators, not just the SEC. I did appreciate this particularly was about the SEC's definition, but what is it reasonable for regulators to assume about reasonable investors? And those assumptions that we all make influence how we make our policy choices, but also how we communicate those policy choices to the investing public. And these are very complex challenges in front of all of us, whether they are in front of us as regulators and policymakers or as individual investors. So I very much appreciate everything that we have heard throughout the morning and the afternoon. I know that we have one more set of remarks from Commissioner Crenshaw. So this is going to be somewhat awkward because I'm going to thank a lot of people, and then you'll hear from Commissioner Crenshaw. So I'd like to start by thanking Commissioner Crenshaw for providing remarks this afternoon, and of course, Commissioner Ueda, as well as the chair from Washington. I want to thank all of our SEC colleagues who are here with us in North Georgia. Of course, Nika Jones, the director of the Atlanta Regional Office. Thank you so very much for everything that has made today possible, and tomorrow as well when we visit Dalton State. I would like to thank Kabir Growal, the director of enforcement, for being here today, as well as Keith Cassidy and I'm so sorry, and Robert Marchman, who made remarks this morning. I'd like to thank NASA for joining us again. We love partnering in these roundtables with the State Securities Administrator, Administrators Association on many things, but especially on these roundtables where we hear important information from investors, and specifically would really like to give our heartfelt thanks to Nuala Zaharis and to the Secretary of State for hosting us today. Above all, we would all of us like to thank the University of North Georgia for allowing us to join you today, enjoy your hospitality, but most of all, hear from you all and your students who have given us a lot of food for thought. You have a tremendous program here that gives me, I will speak for myself, but I think also all of our co-hosts, a great deal of confidence that we are preparing a terrific cohort of financial professionals for the future and terrific retail investors. So thank you so much for everything you have allowed us to do with you today and to share your time with us. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for having me here today, albeit virtually. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be addressing you at today's Joint Investor Roundtable. I want to begin by extending my heartfelt gratitude to the many who toiled to put on this two-day event, those at the SEC, NASA, the Georgia Secretary of State, and others. These roundtables are clearly the result of a tremendous collaborative partnership, and it shows. Both the leadership and staffs of these organizations have been thoughtful about the topics, speakers, and compositions of the roundtables, and meticulous in their execution of the event. And although everyone involved deserves praise, I want to extend a special thank you to Christina Martin-Forvita, the SEC's investor advocate, who began her work only a little over a year ago, but has taken to the role with the perfect mix of grit and grace, and has been laser focused on working to benefit investors of all stripes. This event is critically important. I've been sitting in my seat for nearly 4 years now, and almost every day in those 4 years, I've listened to a cacophony of voices telling my staff and me what the SEC should be doing, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what policies should change. We hear from hedge funds, public companies, national exchanges, brokers, dealers, advisors, digital asset companies, and so on. Some of those people and companies even purport to be speaking on behalf of retail investors. But it's surprisingly rare for us to hear from individual people, those of us who are investing our own money on our own behalf for our individual and collective futures. Today, I have the real privilege of hearing from you. And while you might watch the news at night or read a newspaper and think that our country is hopelessly divided, from my perspective, I think we in fact have a lot in common. We want to invest some money now in a market that's fair and not stacked against the individual investor. We want to grow that money over time in a manner free from fraud, scams, and scandals. And then we want to have it available when we need it for retirement, education, weddings, business ownership, whatever our goals may be. Safe and equitable investing is a common interest for all of us. But of course, that's just what I think. The purpose of our event today is to hear from you. So I'm grateful for your participation, and I hope that you will share with us, what are your impediments to investing? Do you think markets are fair? How can we make investing safer and easier? Please tell us your experiences. We are listening. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your sessions.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Crenshaw. So now, everyone, we're going to have a little 5-minute hiatus here. I know for those of you who've been watching on the video or from the other campuses, as well as in the audience, we're going to have a little 5-minute bathroom break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to split into 2 sessions. We have the law enforcement and regulatory private session upstairs, and then we will, in this room, continue a session moderated by Nuala on investor literacy. We've got some really exciting things from our office. Lori Schock is in the back. And then we're going to hear from Jerry Walsh. I see Pam Gibbs here as well. And so, yeah, we're going to hear from Lori. We're going to hear from Jerry and Nuala and her panel. So exciting stuff coming up. Thank you for joining us. Let's reconvene in about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this next session is indeed open to the public with 3 different blocks regarding fraud prevention, investor advocacy, education, and resources. First up is our Georgia Secretary of State Investment Fraud Panel featuring Kamal Ghali, Ryan Germany, Kyle Ennis, and moderated by Nuala Harris. And Steve McLean. Yes, Steve McLean. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay. This is where investor prevention and investor education meet. We all know that the fraudsters do a really good job of profiling their victims. I believe through investor education, we can profile and understand them. So this panel is going to talk a little bit about that. And just briefly, Kamal, Ryan, Kyle, and Steve, could you quickly introduce yourselves? 30 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. Name and place. Kamal.
Kamal Ghali, I'm a partner at Chaikin Ghali LLP, where I focus on government investigations and complex business disputes. Before that, I was a federal prosecutor for 6 years at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Georgia.
Hi, I'm Ryan Germany. I'm a partner at the law firm of Gilbert Harrell, and we focus on government and regulatory law. Before that, I was the Assistant Commissioner of Securities in Georgia and also the General Counsel for the Georgia Secretary of State.
Kyle Ennis. I'm with the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, the State Government Affairs team. We're a trade association that represents some banks, broker-dealers, asset managers across the country. And prior to that, I was with the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve McLean. I'm the chief of the Complex Fraud and Cybercrime section in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Atlanta. I supervise a group of about 18 prosecutors, and we prosecute all kinds of white-collar crime, including securities fraud.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I guess I'm just going to toss out a question. We're going to do it moderator style. So who wants to go first? I'm going to ask my law enforcement people first. What are some current investment fraud schemes that you're seeing, Steve? And maybe Kamal that used to do it.
I mean, the main thing that we see on the criminal side is the thing that's probably dates way back, which is guaranteed returns, too high rate of returns. And Kamal and I, whenever he was prosecutor, we had a pump and dump case, and so we see a number of those where people are sort of on the inside, they gain control of the stock, maybe it's a penny stock, they then issue false press releases to pump the price up, and then they sell it and profit that way and leave the retail investors holding the bag. We've had some of our biggest sentences in the office have been securities fraud cases. The defendants that we tried for the pump and dump scheme received 10 years in prison. We recently just had a defendant receive, it was almost 8 years in prison, and he was guaranteeing 7% returns per year, and then was saying that he was investing it in conservative investments such as real estate, the stock market, and that sort of thing, which of course is inconsistent with being able to guarantee a rate of return of 7% because those are volatile, although conservative, they're volatile investments. What he was really doing was paying Ponzi profits. So he was taking one investor's money, giving it to another investor, and that's how he's maintaining the 7%. He did that for years and years. And as with all Ponzi schemes, the cards eventually fell down. SEC got involved. We indicted him for wire fraud, and it was a $49 million loss by the end of the day to a lot of retirees, a lot of elder victims who had lost their life savings and retirement accounts. And so he was just sentenced this year, again, about 8 years in prison. So we're seeing a lot of, on the criminal side, it's usually we're looking for outright lies where somebody's just lying about what they're doing with the money. And that frequently comes along with sort of guaranteed high yield percentages that are being guaranteed.
The only thing I'd throw out there in terms of also what's happening now is just the amount of outreach you have using digital communications, whether it's social media accounts, even text messages where you'll have bad actors that are essentially trying to reach a really large swath of the population with something that looks like an investment pitch for something like cryptocurrency or guaranteed returns. So some of these schemes are very, very old, but what is new is sometimes the way it's communicated to the public, how they're reaching individual marks and victims.
I would just add, I was at the state regulatory level. A lot of things, if it's going to get to the U.S. Attorney's Office, it's got to be a pretty successful fraud from a monetary perspective, even at the SEC. What we got a lot of complaints of, and Nuala, you can back this up, are much smaller and one-off things where it's the same thing, but it's a much smaller level. And the other thing I would say is we would see a lot of affinity fraud where you're kind of focused on one particular group, well, whether it's through social media, and then we would see a lot of it's basically the same as what Steve was saying, a guaranteed rate of return. What did they call those, Nuala? Like they're kind of like church. It's like Magic Square. What you know what I'm talking about? It's like where you like keep investing a certain thing on a certain day, and it seems like it goes around a lot of church groups.
Okay. Sort of like, I don't know, but I forgot what it was called. There was the club.
Yeah, but so you see things like that, and it's a lot smaller scale, and so it's never going to get to the level of being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office or anything. But if it's your money, then it's kind of just as significant. And so I think those same red flags are. I actually asked one of the people here, one of the associate deans, what do you guys see on college campuses? I said, I remember when I was in college, a big pyramid scheme went around, and he was like, "Yep, that's exactly what we see today on campus." And it's a little bit different because of the digital and the social media outreach, and the way that people can kind of reach into a particular group. You don't have to have like a guy in a flashy car actually show up on campus anymore. Like that's what happened when I was at Georgia. So we do see a lot of those same red flags, just on a smaller level.
Kyle, are you seeing anything as an industry, now that you're on, like, is industry saying stuff?
It's really interesting because a lot of what the industry is dealing with really is in the technology space, where there's bad actors pretending to be legitimate brokers, right? They're saying, hey, I am Ryan Germany at Gilbert Hale. Go look at my bio page. I'll represent you, take care of your money, and do all this. It's not Ryan. It's somebody. And, they'll give you like legitimate CRD numbers. So if you do like the basic checks that, everybody's out here telling you should do when you look up an investor, it's often they'll clear those checks. I mean, one of the really big important things to do is never to really rely on the phone number somebody gives you, right? Make sure you can reach them through that bio page, through the firm, right? And that's one of the kind of that second level of check out of that really kind of helps with that. But other than that, I mean, we've seen huge instances of senior fraud increasing rapidly. Online contacts, Match.com scams. I think we're going to talk about financial grooming at some point. Yeah.
Just to pick up on the new spin on the old crime, the cryptocurrency, which was mentioned, we've had a number of cases that are initial coin offering fraud, so that people come out and say they got a new cryptocurrency, they market it, they claim a celebrity's involved with it. It's not true. It's a pump and dump again, and then the coin goes up, and then they dump it, and the retail investors are holding the bag again. So we're seeing the cryptocurrency now being used both as a way to pay and get money, and also as the vehicle of the fraud.
I want to go back to something that Steve said earlier about some of the cases they're looking at involving people guaranteeing high rates of return. So here I am, you're the investor, the retail investor, and I need some money quick because I want to go to Greece on my trip, right? So a person comes to me and says, invest in this, we're offering this incredible high rate of return. I mean, that's attractive, but what's the problem with that? I mean, anybody want to answer that? Like, why should I be leery of that?
I mean, anytime you're seeing a guaranteed rate of return, unless it's a bond, then I would be leery. So especially if you're a retail investor and you're getting kind of a guaranteed rate of return. I mean, and if it is a guaranteed rate of return and it's annuity type product, then that's going to be it's going to be a lower return usually. There's going to be fees associated, which kind of makes sense. But so I told Lori this. I don't want to steal from her, but we always hear if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And so that's still good advice. What Lori said once to me, and it's stuck with me ever since. She said, if it sounds too good to be true, you're dealing with an amateur. And that's the key thing is they'll make it sound like, oh, that sounds plausible. And we kind of want to believe it for the reason that you just said, Nuala. And we talked about this on our prep call. I think one thing you do to check yourself is, I think it was Kyle who brought this up about the dense social networks. Like run it by people, run it by your trusted people, whether it's your family or an advisor, run it by those people. And they'll probably be able to really point out some specific red flags in that particular Instagram, solicitation you received.
Right. I would just follow up by saying we had a case recently where we spoke to the victim and she said her gut told her everything was wrong about this, but she watched that money go until it was gone, right? And then she, when we asked her why, she said, well, I got a gut feeling it was bad, but the money looked great my account looked great. Right.
So one of the really interesting things is that, look, as technology evolves, as society evolves, we're talking about this, like the fraud evolves and it gets more sophisticated. I think it was the BBC did this amazing article about Mary Berners-Lee actually got defrauded, and this was one of the women who invented the PC or contributed to its invention. I mean, right woman, and she got caught. And so how these things are ever evolving and ever changing, what can you do, right? And there was this really fascinating study that kind of plays into old hard sales tactics, right? Usually associated with the used car dealer, right? A lot of fraudsters, bad actors are going to do things like they're going to put a time pressure on you. They're going to appeal to your emotions. They're going to say, if you don't do this, you're going to miss out. Playing on that fear of missing out is huge. And then there was a university out in, I won't say the state. It's either Iowa or Nebraska.
Yeah, not Georgia.
But they did this amazing study that basically said, when you are young, right, you have these physiological responses to stimuli that are bad. When you go down the alley and your hairs stand on end, and you just know that's a bad alley, you don't want to go down. As you get older, you start to have those gut reactions to things that are good. You see something exciting or heartwarming, and you will have this physiological goosebump response. But the folks that were being caught on by fraud were not necessarily having any of those responses, right? And so it was being able to play into that's right or that's wrong, kind of help them identify this. So, if you ever get into a situation and you're starting to feel, that emotion, that pressure, that something just right, you see it go up, 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 up. If I don't get in now, I'm going to go on. That's when you need to step back and check yourself and say, check, how am I feeling about this? Is this the reasonable, rational decision? And that's proven to be one of the really good just self-checkpoints when you're trying to prevent fraud.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of just rate of return, I think there are people that intuitively get, well, there is risk in every investment. But then you've got actors that talk about cryptocurrency as if it's so new and you don't even understand. It defies the normal way markets work. There's a blockchain involved. There's computers that'll make it happen. And so they'll take the complexity of something and make it seem like it's really novel and it's different than the way normal markets work. So that's why we can guarantee a rate of return. So sometimes you'll have actors using the complexity of new technology to really convince people that everything that they know is true about the way investments should work aren't because of this really new special thing that somehow defies the laws of the way any kind of risk should work.
And you would say that, I guess, even though technology has changed, the scams haven't changed. It's just they're using the same emotional pull.
I mean, the thing that's changed though is it used to have to be you had to have someone come a lot of times meet you face to face, so you had to go through all these steps like putting the check in the mail, And so it's kind of become easier for the scammers where, you know, they could be from anywhere. They could reach out from anywhere all over the world, and we can send them money a lot easier with the way, you know, no one's having to go to the bank or do stuff. We're doing it all on our phone.
And it's actually created so many more vectors for this outreach too, right? I mean, I was just talking to some friends of mine who've been approached while playing video games. And you know, they said, "Oh, I just got this weird message." I'm going through. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's in about 2 weeks. That's going to turn into a metal scam, right?" And it's just in like the online video game chat room. Anywhere, it's any social media, any kind of connectivity points. There's just so many alleyways. Or now with the text messages of, "Hey, sorry I missed you at dinner last night."
Yep.
Don't respond to those, please. If you don't know who that's coming from.
So how do we, like, I guess, what are some methods that we can protect ourselves against those scams that are out there? You wanna throw that out?
Sure. I mean, I think really it's a combination of all the things we've said. A lot of scams like this operate on making sure that someone is alone, they're isolated, they're cut off from people that would be a check on poor decision making. So I think people use this phrase dense social networks that I really like, so I'm going to steal it. But having dense social networks where you're able to run, hey, someone is saying this will happen. Is this a good or bad idea? Really resisting the need to make a decision very, very quickly. That's generally a sign. And a lot of people make bad decisions, even if you take a long time, but think about how much worse the quality of that decision making is where no one's there to act as a check. And I think the other thing is think about the context that you're getting this investment pitch, like playing video games, a dating app, some random message on Twitter, is try and have a sense of, you know, there's a time and place to be being pitched for investments. Is this one that really makes sense? If you're, you know, just kind of logging in and there's a random message that spelled your name wrong and it says, here's guaranteed rates of return. So I think sometimes it's just doing common sense things, but making sure you have a group that you can go to run things by is really important.
Yeah, checking in on your parents, you know, and you have older parents. I mean, we have an elder justice task force now, and the reason we have that is because elder crime is so rampant. Somebody had mentioned that being a target population, and it really is. And when you combine that with the internet, people sometimes being lonely, maybe being a widow, widower, you know, the romance fraud scam is rampant, where somebody finds somebody online, never meets them. They think they either have a boyfriend or somebody that they one day want to meet, and they're fooled by that, and they're sending money to money mules in America who are moving the money around, and then sometimes shipping it overseas, because a lot of these schemes actually originate, you know, overseas, and then the people that move the money are here, and you'll end up seeing the money go back to India or China or West Africa after the crime's been done. So, you know, checking in on your parents, if you have elderly parents, educating them, making sure they're not falling for those sorts of scams. And then same thing on the youth. You know, we see the Instagram with the youth. They meet somebody online, convince them to send a nude picture or hack into their Instagram picture or account. And if they have a nude picture on Instagram, then that is then emailed to them and then threatened. And, you know, if you don't pay us money through Apple Pay or a Green Dot card or something that's hard to trace, we're going to release, you know, these pictures out into the public. And, you know, the FBI, Instagram actually works to stop that. If kids can report that, it's never as bad as it seems. Whenever it's happening, it seems like the end of the world. And we've even had suicides of young people who are threatened like that. And if they are educated and talked to, say, report it, go to the FBI, go to Instagram, go to your parents. Again, the threats are usually way worse than what's really going to happen, because if you don't pay, they go on to the next victim. And so there's so many people that they're targeting at the same time. It's really never as bad as it seems. And so really, you know, educating, working with your kids, working with your parents. The social network, I think, was the way it was described, and that's what that's about: is communicating, checking in on them, and telling them, you know, look out for these kinds of scams so that you don't fall for them.
Yeah, just to back up really quick. I mean, when folks are talking about a dense social network, this was a concept that came out of the Stanford Center on Longevity a number of years ago, and it really talks about not only do you have connection points that you are reaching out to, and this is not talking about, you know, you need to have 25 friends. You need to have 2, but ideally those two are also talking to each other. If you're younger, you're talking to your parents, and your parents are talking to your siblings, and you're talking to your siblings. Like, that family network is incredible, but you just need those other folks that you talk to also talking to each other. And the other really interesting thing that I think has come out, actually in a FINRA report, was, I am probably going to horribly butcher the outcome of this, but humility. One of the big, like, precursors to fraud is an investor's overconfidence. When they really think they know the markets, but their financial literacy is maybe about half of what they think, that really sets them up for being attacked and being targeted. So really, like, if, another opportunity to just kind of check that, like, do you really know as much as you do? Be open to learning, be open to asking questions, be open to asking for help.
I would just add, we're talking about kind of investments to avoid. I think one way to help avoid those is to have a good investment strategy on the front end. And a lot of different investment strategies can work. What I've heard is, like, the only one that doesn't work is no strategy at all. You've got to have an investment strategy. You've got to stick to it. And then if you do that, I think a lot of fraud depends on some feeling of desperation in the person. And so if we have an investment strategy, it might just be investing in index funds. It might be, I have a financial advisor, and that's who I use for these things. If you have that, these kind of outreach, like we're talking about from a video game, that's not part of anyone's strategy, right? So if you have that investment strategy, and you actually stick to it, then I think you're kind of protecting yourself from those really unusual outreaches that a lot of times end up being fraudulent.
One thing that just occurs to me, when we're talking about protecting yourself from fraud, we're really talking about sometimes these scams that are just rotten to the core. They don't make sense. Someone's pretending to be an investment advisor. But there is another aspect of protecting yourself from fraud, which is just a lot of due diligence, where you have reputable, established people that have what is otherwise a legitimate investment vehicle. But it reminds me of a case that actually did with Steve, where a business partner was lying to the other, taking money, spending it on things without telling the other. And sometimes it's going above and beyond and doing a little extra diligence, asking to see records. Sometimes those can be fabricated. I mean, there are sometimes where bad people will really spend a lot of time making it difficult, but really trying to diligence your investments is important in any event. So even when you're not dealing with just the obvious scams, there's still definitely a time and a place to make sure that everything is happening the way it should be.
We had a case, Kamal, when I was at Secretary of State's office, and I think some people were doing that additional level of diligence, asking for documents, and then the person was trying to basically fraudulently create the documents, and that's basically what got him caught. So yeah, that worked.
And you're talking about diligence with the technology these days. I mean, whenever you get a phone call now and the caller ID says it's from Merrill Lynch or from the sheriff's department, it might not be, because the bad guys are now spoofing numbers, and AI is going to, I think, accelerate this so that who knows what else gets spoofed down the road. If it's, maybe somebody's voice can get spoofed, or maybe even on a Zoom call that somebody's appearance can get spoofed. But, due diligence is, a lot of people say, well, Merrill Lynch is calling or a sheriff's office is calling. Don't accept that. Call back, call the real number for Merrill Lynch, call the real number for the sheriff's office. Say, hey, is there a detective there named so-and-so? I just got a call from that person. Let me talk to them. Or I just got a call from Merrill Lynch, somebody, can I talk to them? And if it's a scam, they're going to say, no, that person doesn't work here. And so that's the kind of due diligence too, I think, in today's new world of the technology and the capabilities of people to be able to disguise what they're really doing that didn't exist, even 10, 15 years ago.
We're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes, but I wanted to touch on something that Kylie talked about, humility. What about shame and embarrassment? We're finding that shame and embarrassment sometimes causes the victims of fraud to downplay the situation, and sometimes they even refuse to report it. So how do we move away from victim shame to victim support? What can we do? Or how can we encourage people? It's okay.
No, I think the first thing to understand is that, look, this panel has been full of great advice and you can follow all of this advice and they can still come and take your money. I mean, really appreciating that these are organized bad actors who are well equipped, well trained, and if they're out in the world right now, they haven't been caught for a reason, right? So it's not anything that you did wrong. It's just these folks are really, really good. But on top of that, right, there is this taboo about being, oh, I don't want to be a victim. And really not just from an investor standpoint of, hey, it's okay, from a structural standpoint, when you're talking about the SEC, FINRA, the state securities regulators, right? Anybody who's dealing with folks who have had their money taken from them, it's really important to use language that is ensuring that you're not re-victimizing folks. And again, I'm going to go back to FINRA because they do such amazing work on so many things. AARP and FINRA got together and put out a report on really shifting away from this unfortunate victim blaming language that has become common parlance. And I'm sure, there's probably been a slip over too on this panel, even just because it's so ingrained in the way we speak. But just know, right, it's not you, right? Go out and talk to people. Go out and talk to people. And if you're on the investigatory side, just be careful with the language that you're using and really try to create this, welcoming environment to get these stories out.
That shame kind of embarrassment factor has led, I think, to kind of like what you were saying, Nuala, where people are ashamed, and that's the difference between them being defrauded for a few $100 or a few $1,000 versus they're kind of ashamed to report it, to talk to someone about it, and then it leads to a massive hundreds of $1,000s life savings loss type of thing. And so I think Kyle makes a really good point to the extent, even, as we know, kind of from the government side here, it's really hard to get people that money back.
Yes.
But if not impossible, but if you can limit the damage to hundreds or thousands of dollars as opposed to life savings, that you have to take that as a win.
So what separates a victim from a non-victim? Right.
Sometimes it's just luck of the draw. Yeah, again, going back to that report that FINRA did about overconfidence, one of the most telling things I ever saw was like someone goes, okay, so what are the average characteristics of a victim, right? And they tend to be older, they tend to have some vulnerabilities, they tend to have some cognitive decline, or there's something in their life that makes them reliant on other people. And if you believe what I just said, then you are potentially set up to be a victim of one of these crimes. This isn't things that happen to other people. This happens kind of across the board. And it's, diligence on every part. There was another study that came out actually that found that law departments were the most commonly successfully phished departments in any corporation. Just they're so used to everybody's so used to handling such sensitive information across the board all the time. It's not an out of bounds request.
The one thing I'll add is how it can make you very socially awkward because you're always worried you're being phished. Like I've had someone like, I need help, like I've been defrauded, this happened. And I asked a lot of questions, but I was like, I would be pretty annoyed and offended if I were like the other person, like, oh, really? Let's see a little more. And so there is a part of, if you're always skeptical of everyone, you've got to like accept it might come off awkwardly. It might seem a little rude or intrusive, but the alternative is you leave yourself vulnerable unless you do that. So it's getting comfortable with, I think, some of that awkward and resisting some of the impulse to not ask questions.
Anyone else? Okay, real quick, we're at the last minute. I'm going to ask each of you to give me one thing that you can offer, one thing to remember to avoid a financial scam. One piece of advice. Come on.
Don't invest in opportunities you learn about on dating websites. Don't do it. Just don't do it.
I'm going to expand it a little bit, and because it's not just investment fraud. I think there's so many ways, whether it's whether we get hacked or something. So I would just say, vigilance. I mean, be aware of your accounts. Be aware of your credit cards. Like, be checking these things. Look for things that are suspicious. You can take simple steps like freezing your credit. It's free now. You can do things like we all use kind of Venmo and things like that. You can take the slightly extra step of using like I use Amex Send as opposed to my bank account. So that's a little more protected if those kind of things get hacked. Because for me, I don't want to be the victim of investment fraud, like hacking fraud. It's all the same money, right? I don't want it to be going anywhere that I don't want it to be going.
Yeah, I'd say, in addition to a lot of what we've talked about, going back to kind of one of the earlier pieces about not doing anything with urgency when you're talking about your financial plan, right? If you're feeling time pressure or someone has sent you an email that has scared you, that should be one of the kind of first red flags that you see. And always take the step back, take the time, and really try to process that.
Yeah, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If it's a fly-by-night thing, something you haven't heard of, and it's beating everything in the market, and it just sounds too good to be true, probably is. And do your due diligence when you're encountering something like that. Internet, Google, talking to other people, making calls, talking to friends and relatives, and try to avoid those things.
Well, I think we're done. If you have any questions, we'll be around afterwards. So we'd love to talk to you and meet with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nuala, Kamal, Kyle, Steve McLean, and Ryan. Thank you so much for your invaluable information and perspectives for the retail investor community as well as the organizations in the room. Next up, we have Lori Schock. She is the director of the Office of Investor Education Advocacy at the SEC. Lori has served since 2009 as the director, the commission's champion in providing America's investors with the tools and information they need to make wise investment decisions and avoid fraud. We also have Ms. Jerry Walsh, the Senior VP of Investor Education at the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA. In her capacity, she is responsible for the development and operations of FINRA's Investor Education Program. She is also the president of the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, where she manages the foundation's strategic initiatives to educate and protect investors and to benchmark and foster financial capability for all Americans, especially our underserved communities. Welcome, ladies.
Well, great. Thank you. I'll kick things off. I'm going to start the day or end the day, I hope the way it was started this morning, with a disclaimer that the views I express here today are mine and mine alone and don't necessarily represent those of the commission or the staff of the commission. With that out of the way, however, we've heard a lot today. And, it's like, wow, should we even be investing? It sounds scary. A lot of fraud out there. We had some investors talk about their experiences, quite frankly, not the best experiences I've heard. So what can we do? My office is the Office of Investor Education and Advocacy. We're about 45 people strong. We have a lot of attorneys and investor specialists who actually take phone calls, questions, emails, however they come into the commission, and we respond to those. It's not a service that most federal agencies have, quite frankly. So we're very pleased to offer that. We just wish people would contact us before they've turned over their hard-earned money and potentially lost it. So with that, we handle over 30,000 questions and complaints on an annual basis. Not surprisingly, the number one complaint is now crypto assets. Now, it's not necessarily about cryptocurrency themselves. More than likely, there's scams where, hey, they were dangling the prospect of investing in crypto assets. There never was going to be this. They turned over their money. Generally, it was going offshore. Guess what? The money is gone. Once it goes overseas, it makes it that much more difficult. And crypto is just its own monster in some ways. So that has been our number one complaint now for several years running. We also put out investor alerts and bulletins. We work closely with FINRA and the state securities regulators. that if we have something jointly that we're hearing about, by the time we're hearing it, we know there's, it multiplied by, hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands, by what we're actually hearing. So we'll put out joint investor alerts and bulletins. I encourage you that if you've not signed up for those, please go to investor.gov to sign up for them. That is the retail website for the commission. So sec.gov has a lot of other business uses, a lot of filings and things go through sec.gov. That's why we launched investor.gov in 2009, so that there would be just investor education materials without any of the other sort of noise, if you will. And then finally, we do outreach programs, ones like this. If I were to sum up our messaging, it would be fraud, fees, and risk. Based on what I've heard today, I think I've hit them pretty succinctly. So Jerry and I have done our little song and dance across the world, actually, because we also work with IOSCO, which is an international organization of securities commission. So I'm going to turn it over to Jerry to talk for a little bit, and we'll go back and forth.
And then we'll just have the fun that we always have, because Lori is the song and I am the dance. When encouraged, I can do a little river dance. I took Irish step dancing.
I do not have a disclaimer to sing, so no.
And I don't have a disclaimer to make. I'm with FINRA, and you're probably wondering who that is. It's the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, and we are not the government. We are sort of a creature of congressional statute. Back in 1939, Congress saw fit to create this self-regulatory model for the securities industry. So we operate under the oversight of the Securities and Exchange Commission, but we are a not-for-profit, non-governmental regulator of one slice of the securities industry, the broker-dealers that sell stocks, bonds, mutual funds, variable annuities, other types of investments. And when we do a lot of outreach as well, and a lot of the key messages that we try to bring out to investors through our social media channels, through videos that we do, through outreach, through the partners that we work with, because we work through and with a number of partners to get our messages out. We know we can't boil the ocean. We know we can't be everywhere. And so a number of the organizations that were represented here today have been or are currently our partners in getting these messages out. But they really boil down to three key questions that the earlier panels today have underscored and italicized and put into bold. And that is, when you're thinking about investing, it is so important to understand how it works, whatever the it is, right? What does it cost? Because it costs something, even in a zero commission account. And what could go wrong? And when you think about that, how does it work? If it's an investment, is it registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission? The SEC has this great resource called EDGAR, where you can look up and see whether an investment is in fact registered. And there are very few exceptions for being registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So if it's a new company, if it's a new invention, find out whether it's registered with the SEC. If it's a financial professional that you're working with, or a new type of platform, maybe it's a crypto asset platform, but maybe it's some strategy that you're being encouraged to engage in. Currency speculation, cryptocurrency speculation, anything like that. Is that platform registered? Because if a person or an entity is offering securities to you in the United States, they are required to be registered with the SEC, registered with FINRA, whether they're a broker dealer or an investment advisor. If they are not, that is a massive red flag. And we have a tool on our website called Broker Check. You can go to finra.org/brokercheck, and you can type in the name of an investment professional or firm and find out whether they're registered with us, with the SEC, or with the state securities regulators. Depending on the kind of business that they're engaged in, it might be any one of the three, or it might be all three. But if someone is making a recommendation to you about your investments and they are not registered they don't show up in broker check, that is a massive red flag. The whole, what does it cost? There are always fees and expenses. Always, always, always. Trust me. And even if you are in a zero commission trading account, like a lot of the app-based platforms that are available now, you're not paying per trade, but you're actually probably pretty limited in the stocks that you can buy because not every stock is available for zero commission. Bonds aren't, other types of investments aren't. So it's not a universal thing that there's no fee. And if you're investing in a mutual fund or in an exchange traded fund, you might not pay a commission to make that purchase on your app, but there are going to be fees that are built into the product. What are those fees? How do those fees impact your returns over time? FINRA actually developed a tool called the Fund Analyzer to help you see and compare the costs over time that funds can have and the impact that they can have on your investments. I know the SEC has a fabulous chart that they often promote sort of separately, but they have it in some of their investor bulletins that shows the impact of just 1% difference in price. 1% doesn't sound like a whole lot, but over a long holding period of 10 or 20 years, it can be tens of thousands of dollars. That's just you're throwing away because you're paying a higher fee for the investment. What does it cost in terms of opportunity, right? If you're tying up your assets in a startup company and it's a very illiquid investment, we heard about REITs earlier. Some types of REITs, you actually can't take your money out for a while. Insurance products like variable annuities, you tie up your money for a period of time. That's an opportunity cost where you can't invest in other things. So there's always going to be some kind of cost. You want to know how much it is, and you want to know how much you're paying. And if you're working with an investment professional, we heard from financial professionals from our very first panel. We know that they charge fees. Some of them are assets under management fees, which are typically a percentage of the amount of money that you've invested with the firm. Sometimes it's a fixed fee. Maybe it's an hourly financial planning fee, or it's an annual contract fee that you pay, or a monthly subscription fee. Other times it's a, trade by trade. Do the math. And here at the business school, I have to believe that that's going to be something that comes somewhat naturally. I was a history major. It does not come naturally to me. But you have to do the math so that you understand what the impact is of those fees, whether it's paying for financial advice or professional services, or whether it's paying for the investment itself. And when it comes to the what goes wrong element, Lori and I can talk all day about that, but this is really coming down to risk. And how much risk can you take as an investor, especially when you're using your phone, you've got this awesome app, it's very frictionless, it's super easy to navigate. Be aware that not all stocks are created equal, right? We heard about penny stocks and microcap stocks earlier. And there is we don't have merit-based regulation, paternalistic regulation where we say, oh no, you can't buy this particular stock or that particular stock. They're publicly traded companies. You can buy the stocks of those companies. But not all of them are created equal. Not all of them have a long history. Not all of them are making money. Not all of them have good prospects. But a lot of them might show up in your customized feed of things that you might want to be considering. Because we are seeing, one of the uses of data science is this behavioral nudge of like, well, you've invested in these kinds of companies, why don't you consider these other companies? And they might not be right for you, which really boils down to know yourself as an investor. How much money can you 100% lose? Just put that figure in your brain and think about it. If you're investing $1,000 and you can lose $10, you probably don't want to take a lot of risk. If you're investing $1,000 and you can lose $1,000, then you might be perfectly positioned to take risk because that $1,000 is funny money to you. Not funny money to me. I grew up as the daughter of immigrants who were economic migrants to our wonderful country. Neither of my parents went to college and we grew up poor. So I, even today, $1,000 is not something that I want to throw away. If you can do that, you probably have a different risk tolerance than me. And you're going to have a different risk tolerance than your friends, than your cousins, than your neighbors. You're also going to have a different risk tolerance than the people that you might be following on social media for getting investment advice. And so know yourself and always come back to what your goals are when you're thinking about investing. I could go on for 99 hours, but I'm going to stop and let my good friend Lori talk.
All right, great. Thanks. As you were speaking, Jerry, a couple things just sort of resonated with me, and I wish our investors from earlier were still in the room. Maybe they're joining us. Luke? Okay, Luke. And poor Luke has been called out all day long. No, I was talking about, when we heard earlier about, I had all of my money invested in one stock. Anyone see a problem with that? Yeah, what did mom always say? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's the power of diversification. As Jerry said, if you can afford to lose it, but that's losing it all. I don't think anyone can afford to lose it all. So, put some money here, some money there, some money here. You want something risky? Fine. If you can afford to lose it, I'll be honest with you, when I speak to especially folks in college age, first-time job earners, I only invest in crypto assets. Okay. I generally say don't invest more in crypto than you can afford to lose. So, maybe those lessons are going to be learned from the School of Hard Knocks. Maybe they'll be tomorrow's millionaire. I don't know. I can just, it's always interesting. Our disclosure is past performance is not indicative of future performance. However, that's all we have to look at. My projection of the future is skewed. I don't know what it is. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here. But I can go on what's happened in the past. And if he had invested in that S&P 500 mutual fund, broadly diversified, low fees, and stayed in it for those 40 years, what would have that looked like? It was a totally different picture. When does it get hard? It gets hard when you get punched in the face, without a doubt. And that's that plan. Plan it, don't panic. I put out a director's take article on that. Take a look at it. I also have one on fear of missing out. Take a look at that. All on investor.gov. It may take longer than 5 minutes. You know what? Important things in life do take longer than 5 minutes. We're talking about your finances and we're talking about your financial future. Luke, I know you got more than 5 minutes in you. Absolutely. Okay. I'm not going to ever be able to put something out on TikTok. I'm just not going to. Federal government, not going to be able to do it. In fact, we had a Twitter hack. We're limiting our profile on Twitter. I'm not going to be on Reddit. I know people are out there. I know, the meme stock investing was driven in large part through Reddit. I can, however, do a public service campaign, and I do. Our office does this. The agency does this once a year, and we try to focus on these things. But we're not spending billions of dollars on it either. So that's why we need to have, what's happening in your community. And here's one other thing. If you see something, oh, I know this is a fraud, I would never invest in this. So don't stop there. Please report it to us. Please report it to the state securities regulator. Please report it to FINRA. I would rather have 100 complaints about the same fraud than instead, oh, everyone knows that's a fraud. I'm not going to report it, because guess what? People fall for it, and they may be your friends, your family, your neighbors. It's just one of those things. 20 plus years of experience in this space. I started, the biggest thing that started the first year I was at the commission was 9/11. Okay. So now we've got the safety and security of the markets at risk. We've got physical issues in New York and with the data centers, then what came after that? Enron, WorldCom, the accounting scandals, Sarbanes-Oxley. Oh, we're never this busy. I promise, Lori. It's like, we're working like a dog here. It's like, I'm not sure what I got myself into. And it's like, no, things will calm down. No, the financial crisis, Bernie Madoff, 2008, 2009, And it just keeps coming, Dodd-Frank, huge piece of legislation. So, while we can't give advice, I can say what we've seen and what these patterns continue to perpetuate. Earlier, Nuala talked about, the way that it's communicated might have changed, but the name of the game is still the same. It's how can I steal your money when it comes to fraud? All right. How can you protect yourself? Be an educated investor. If you get it and your friends don't get it, share your knowledge with your friends, your family, everybody. This is one of those multi-generational, bottom up, top down, sideways, doesn't matter. Share the information, share your experiences, because if you're facing something, more than likely someone else has faced it as well. But if you see something, please say something.
Absolutely. And, if your brokerage firm asks you to designate a trusted contact on your account, this is something where the state securities regulators, the SEC and FINRA have worked so hard to raise awareness among investors about the importance of having a trusted contact on your account. The idea is that if for whatever reason the firm suspects something, they might have gotten a request for a wire transfer to wire money out of your account, you might not be aware of it. That's the whole point. It's a potentially fraudulent disbursement of your money out of your account. They might have to sell securities in order to transfer that money out of your account. This gives the brokerage firm someone else to reach out to if they can't reach out to you. Or if you or your parent, so encouraging you to encourage your parents to designate trusted contacts, if they're the ones who are saying, hey, no, I want to liquidate my account because I want to send it to my, new friend in another country, the firms are often frustrated because the minute that money leaves the firm and goes out of the country, it is gone. It is very difficult to get it back. And so the best tool that they have is the ability to reach out to somebody else, to report it to state securities regulators, to work in the case of older investors with adult protective services, to try to see if they can stop this from happening. But all too often, and it might be a natural disaster, right? I mean, there might be something going on in your community and something crazy is going on in your account. And this just gives the brokerage firm somebody else to reach out to verify. Your trusted contact can't do anything in your account. They cannot make transactions. They can't access the balance that you have. They can't see anything. They can just verify that, Kyle is on vacation in the Caribbean and I understand his cruise ship doesn't have Wi-Fi, right? No big deal. So trusted contact is so important. And we've got information on our website. Lori mentioned investor.gov. I commend that to you at nasa.org, NASA with 2 A's, the North American Securities Administrators Association.
3 in total.
3 in total. 2 A's at the end as opposed to the space agency, or FINRA.org investors. And of course, the state of Georgia has a ton of great information, both in hard copy and on their website. Use those resources. There's a lot of what could the SEC do? What can other regulators do to get the word out? And we're doing as much as we can, but Lori's staff of 45, my staff of a baker's dozen when we're fully staffed, and right now we're not, we can't boil the ocean, right? We're fewer than 100 people with all 3 of our offices combined, the state of Georgia as well. There are over 100 million investors in the United States. So it's awfully hard to reach everybody. We are on social. I know, Lori was mentioning that they're on social less, but you guys are still on
We're
social.
still there.
You're good.
It's a challenge.
But follow us, right? Follow us. Because we compete with a lot of voices that have commercial backing, right? Each of the financial services firms puts out a great deal of information. And then of course, there are all these financial influencers or finfluencers. And we know from the research that the FINRA Foundation has done that particularly among newer investors, social media is a primary source. Close to 3/4 of Gen Z were investing before the age of 21. 3/4 of Gen Z were investing before the age of 21, which is, if you think about this new face of investors, that's wonderful. We've never had such a young and diverse investing population in the under 35 crowd. It's usually like 10%, very small, but they are a huge percentage of the investing population. And that's exciting. That's really exciting for their long-term growth prospects. But if they're getting their information from social, we did a sweep of influencers and found that 70% of the posts that were related to broker dealers. So I'm not even talking about the financial influencers who are not registered, right? I'm talking about the firms that are and their affiliates. They're not making disclosures. They've got untrue information. They've got incomplete information, misleading information. And, on the one hand, that's marketing, but on the other hand, that's a violation. And we're doing our best to take action against the wrongdoers that we see. But you can't trust everything that you see in any channel, whether it's social media or radio, podcasts, TVs. You always need to think about, what's motivating that person, right? Kim Kardashian was getting paid to promote crypto, right? Did you know that? Not until the action was taken by the SEC. Would it have helped you to know? Would it have changed your decision if you thought, for every new account, she gets some payment from the firm, or she's also invested, right? Like, think about what the conflicts of interest are when somebody's making a recommendation. I mean, anyone who has anything to sell fundamentally has a conflict of interest because they've got something to sell. They want your money. They want you to buy from them. They want to get that commission. They want you to be their customer for future customers. Now, that's not inherently wrong. That's how our capitalist system works. But when a conflict of interest puts you as the financial consumer in a position where you're not getting the best advice, you're getting an imbalanced recommendation, and you might be paying a whole lot more for the same thing that you could get elsewhere at a less costly price, that's not the best thing. That's not in your best interest. So
I'm going to leave
you.
it with a story. How about that?
I love that.
Okay. So people learn by storytelling. It's one of those things that sticks with them, such as if it sounds too good to be true, you're dealing with an amateur. Thank you.
All right.
All right. No, I love it. So I was zipping on I-75 from Chattanooga, and the cop pulls up behind me, and I'm like, great. However, he kept passing me by, which I was very thankful for. But if I'd been stopped and pulled over for speeding, what would he have asked me? First thing, license and registration, right? It's the same thing here in the securities world and when it comes to investing. All right. This is a highly regulated industry. License. The person who's selling it needs to be licensed, and you can do that background check. You can do it from broker check. You can do it from investor.gov. You can do it through the state securities regulator. Give them a call. They'll give you the background. If they're not licensed, huge red flag on the play. Okay. Do not turn over your hard-earned money until you've done a lot more due diligence, because they probably don't have any business doing business with you. All right. If they are registered, okay, great. I can look at do they have any violations? What licenses did they hold? What firms do they work for? What firms have they worked for? They move from firm to firm to firm, or, oh no, my spouse is in the military. If you this is the person contacted you. Now, how are you going to independently verify this? It used to just be able to do this background check. But as we were told earlier, people are actually using a legitimate licensed person's name, their good name. So you need to contact the firm through an independently, that number is in through CRD, through IARD, whichever way, which is how the sausage is made. Contact the firm through that telephone number, because we see websites that have a fake telephone number. You see it on travel websites also, just FYI, if you ever you have an issue, it's all over the place. You've got to independently source these contacts, all right? And then when the products themselves, Okay, I know there's some exemptions from registration, but the majority of investments that retail investors make are going to be registered with the SEC. All right, that's going to that Edgar database that Jerry mentioned earlier. Again, you can access that either through sec.gov or investor.gov. Because if it's not registered, if you're starting out, this probably isn't the best thing for you. Start with something that's registered. Even though I can't give investment advice, it seems like that might be a good idea. All right, so license and registration. Just remember that and share it with anyone else who says, hey, I got a contact from this guy about blah, 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 whatever it is. And however they contacted you. I was playing Words with Friends and they wanted to chat. No. AI is the other thing. And just investor alert on that, collectively done. Take a look at it. It's a burgeoning area, but we're already seeing it being misused. Jeff Bezos is not trying to get you to go to WhatsApp to talk about his personal investing. Okay. But it's out there and it looks like he is. So, and a whole bunch of other things. Jerry?
I want to tell a little story that's totally different, but I mentioned that, you know, daughter of immigrants, didn't have a lot of money. My sister and I were the first in our family to go to college, first generation here in the US. So I took out X amount of dollars for undergrad, right? 4 years of undergrad, took out X. I went to law school, recovering lawyer as well. I love my job in investor ed. But in the first year of law school, I was more than 2X with my debt. And this was in the day back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, that interest rates were 9 and 12%.
Yep.
9 and 12%. So rule of 72, working really fast to make me a very poor person. So I was actually thinking, oh my goodness, what do? I don't particularly like law school. I'm not sure I want to be a lawyer, but I have to finish because the only way I'm going to make enough money is if I have a law firm salary for a few years, pay off my debt, and then go do what I really want to do. So that's what I did. And I thought naively that I would be graduating with ×4, right? My initial pot of money and then, you know, X for the 3 years of law school. Remember the gentleman who mentioned the compound interest calculator? Yeah, I didn't have one. I also didn't understand the concept of interest being capitalized when some of the loans that you're taking out, and for grad school, and some of you know this, you know, the loans that you take out are not necessarily federally guaranteed. And so you are on the hook for the interest while you are still in school. So yeah, it was ×7. But I tell you this story because, hey, that happened to me. That wasn't financial fraud, but boy, it felt like a robbery. And I felt like I was a walking house because I felt like there were people who had super fancy houses who paid less than I had paid for my education. But I did pay it off. I developed a spending plan pretty early on that had me living like a church mouse. But I still had fun. I was in Washington, D.C. Life was good. I actually, you know, I went out to restaurants from time to time. It's possible. So I just say that there is hope, to quote the name of some of our partner friends. There is hope when you do get into a financial ditch, whether it's student loans or fraud, you can recover. There are ways beyond those challenges. And part of the reason that I do what I do is because I never wanted anybody else to walk that path that I walked. But, you know, for the students who are here, you're at the beginning of your career where you think you're going to go might not be where you go, and that's okay. You might end up somewhere even better. I'm not a partner at a law firm in Washington, D.C. I run a foundation that works with all these amazing partners, including state regulators, the SEC. We've worked with Operation Hope. We've worked with SFEPD. We've worked with the Girl Scouts. We work with AARP. I love my job, and it is not a job that was ever even a glimmer in my eye when I was starting out. So you've got an amazing career ahead of you. talk to Luke if you haven't yet, because he can help you make sure that you don't make some of those mistakes. That, you know, very brave people were honest enough to come forward and tell you so that you don't make those mistakes either. So with that, I would close by saying I wish you all the best. Please know that securities regulators are here as your resource and your ally. And do speak up if you see something, because the only way we know as regulators that something wrong is happening is in the industry is if investors speak up.
And I have to say, just on a personal note, thank you for having us here today. I can't believe we're in Dahlonega. My mom's family's from Winder, and she has very fond memories of Camp Glisson. And then I think it's Camp Merrill is where my dad spent some quality time doing his ranger training back in the day. So thank you for having us here today. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lori and Jerry, for that beautiful song and dance. Before we conclude, does anyone have any questions and or comments?
Luke, it's your opportunity.
Well, I can make one more pitch, as long as this will be the song and dance. You know, we've been talking about investing, but everyone who is at this school and at any of the UNG campuses, the financial services industry is a potential career path for you. And FINRA has a Securities Industry Essentials exam that you can take right now in college. And it sort of positions you to work for a securities firm. And you know what? Lori often hires, I often hire, and I'm talking about the big weeds, right? The SEC, FINRA, state securities regulators, and a lot of the nonprofits that have been doing such great work. We heard about several of them. So, you know, think about those as potential career paths.
Come and spend some quality time with the federal government. We have a great organization to work for. We also have student loan repayment, and we're on a different pay scale than the rest of the federal government, which helps as well. Just as a pitch to those who may be starting out. I don't think anyone's ever regretted working at the Securities and Exchange Commission.
I definitely don't. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining this particular discussion. Thank you to our panelists, Lori Schott, Jerry Walsh. Some of us have to get on the road to Dalton tonight, so we're going to conclude now. I believe upstairs they have concluded, but we'll double check. But everyone have safe travels. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.